the Tempest Sorcerer strides into battle, clad in full plate armor, able to channel the destructive wrath of their deity, devastating the battlefield with the full force of lightning and thunder. A battle mage who can destroy any large encounter or formidable boss. One decisive strike from the Tempest Sorcerer will seal the fate of battle and take out the anxiety of honor mode. However, it's not just about damage, and the heavy armor is not there for show. This caster is protected behind layers of AC and damage mitigation, a feat not many magic users can pull off. If you're looking for a truly powerful damage dealer and party face, this build is capable of carrying you through honor mode. Before we get into it, on screen is a summary of the build. I don't want to waste your time, so for the returning players looking for a quick explanation, there is a written version of the Tempest Sorcerer and many others in the description. You'll find a PDF filled with familiar in-game images and clickable links that lead to the BG3's wiki for spells, consumables, and gear options. The document is intended as an easy-to-follow, quick reference guide while you have the game up. If you choose to watch the video, you'll have me walk you through the build, explaining how and why it works. You'll benefit from thousands of hours of practical in-game knowledge, and you have my guarantee that I have played this build from start to finish without any respecs. I promise you, you'll learn new techniques and new ways to approach the game. Okay, for the experienced or returning players, you can skip to the tech section if you're familiar with the build and only looking to learn the silly tricks it can get into. From consistently triggering surprise rounds without losing your action to truly diabolical stuff like the multiple ways to enable infinite class resources from as early as Act 1. Or maybe you're looking for a pivot into a cantrip build. Focus on twin casting with Gemini gloves that you can use more than once thanks to unique tech I only recently discovered. Turning a simple cantrip into a triple-digit nuke against a single target or an outright war crime against any unsuspecting group. With that being said, I recommend newer players start at character creation to understand how everything works and how to use each individual spell effectively with real examples. Before committing to the build, let's go over some pros and cons to see if it is a good fit for your next BG3 adventure. Pros: high burst damage thanks to easy vulnerability. Encounters can be over in the blink of an eye with this build. With a single click of a resource, you can guarantee maximum roll damage on a lightning spell, easily dealing with scary enemies such as the Bullet, blasting Merkel with an almost 300 damage Witch Bolt, or deleting entire encounters with a twinned Chain Lightning. This will take out a lot of the anxiety out of major battles in an honor run. The Wet vulnerability is very easy to set up and doubles your cold and lightning damage. If you follow this guide, I'll show you how to set up with Create Water so that you still have your action intact when battle begins. Although we're focusing on lightning for this build, you do have access to many more damage types, allowing you to exploit other weaknesses when needed. Being a charisma character makes this build a great party face, giving you ample opportunities throughout the game to use that silver tongue of yours to avoid violence. That is, if you hate fun. It's also rare to see a caster adorned in heavy armor. Enemies will generally miss you, but when you do take hits, you can mitigate damage and shrug off critical hits. Cons: you have costly resources, meaning you are both short and long rest dependent. This can cause cadence issues with martial heavy parties. However, I personally don't like long resting this much, but it actually works better for this build. I do go over some tech at the end of the video to help avoid long rests for returning players looking for some silly fun to add to their playthrough. Your hit chance leaves something to be desired, especially in Act 1. It can feel bad when you miss a high-level spell slot and squander your channel divinity charge. I have tried my best to help this pain point with itemization, techniques, and strategy to smooth out your early game until you reach better optimization. And since with multiclass in Act 1, progression might feel a tiny bit slow, this build starts to feel good from level 3, but won't feel truly out of this world until you get Lightning Bolt, which should be by the Gith Yankee Crash. Also, the whole Wet plus Lightning can start to feel one note, but you have more synergies and interactions to play with if you feel so inclined. Let's start a character creation. Before I lose you all, we're not just going to stare at the leveling up screen for this section. I'll give you practical examples of how to use each spell and ability in this section, and I promise you'll learn something new. If you don't, I'll ship you a jar of Shadowheart's bathwater as compensation. And with that out of the way, I'm glad to say that race does not matter for optimization, so pick whatever you feel suits your roleplay the best. For the purposes of this video, our channel darling is Mummy Milkers, who is a female human with no special qualities or benefits for this particular build, except being really hot, and I'm definitely not compensating for anything. That and her name really upsets people who don't shower. Our first class is Cleric. To make things easy to follow, we're going to go top to bottom, starting with cantrips. Guidance is our first choice, and useful for the entirety of the game, as you'll see a lot of these pop up during the course of your playthrough, especially during dialogue. Guidance adds a 1d4 bonus to your ability checks. I want to make the distinction here that it works for checks and not saving throws. Outside of conversation, I personally find guidance very useful to help with athletic checks. By casting this on yourself preemptively, you'll gain this 1d4 to your shove and throw rolls. Next is Blade Ward, a cantrip that lasts for 2 turns and halves damage from all physical sources, namely bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. Combined with our armor choice, we can pretty much shrug off any hits in Act 1 with no damage or minor scratches. The only downside to this cantrip is that it uses an action and only lasts 2 turns. To get around this, I have a few solutions. Precast this before an expected battle like a tryhard, or use extended Metamagic to double the duration to 4 turns, or before the animation finishes, end your turn. This is called turn buffering, and finishing the animation outside of our turn gives us an extra turn on the duration for no resource cost. There's a little more to go over with turn buffering, but we'll talk about that in the tech section. Our last cleric cantrip for now is resistance, simply adding a 1d4 to saving throws. The best use will be out of combat, like the few notable saving throw events worth pursuing, such as the Necromancer Fae, Saphus, or Sharon Statue Bus. As for our subclass, if you figured out that the subclass is Tempest Domain from the video title, the Brain Rot hasn't completely taken over yet, and you'll be awarded 2 spells. The first being Thunder Wave. It deals 2d8 thunder in a 5-meter arc and requires the enemy to do a con save or get blasted in quite a spectacular fashion. It has a good targeting area, although you have to finagle it a bit with the targeting to get the desired trajectory. Don't worry about the maths. I can't even spell calculus or figure out the cosine on my ass. It's a video game, so just use your eyeballs. Combine it with gravity for an insta-kill. With this spell, I generally assume enemies will save more often than not on the pushback, but that's not to diminish that when it works alright. And the second spell being Fog Cloud, a 10-turn concentration that heavily obscures and blind creatures in a 4.5 meter radius wherever you place it. Just be careful, as this spell is considered a hostile action and will aggro nearby NPCs. In combat, enemies outside the cloud will be able to attack you with advantage, but if they're inside with you, any advantage will be cancelled for both you and the enemy. This doesn't sound useful, but it can nullify sources of advantage, like a barbarian or Minotaur's reckless attacks. If you're crouching inside the cloud, the enemy AI will break and usually skip its turns. Tempest Domain clerics also get Wrath of the Storm. When a nearby enemy hits you, you can use a reaction to retaliate with 2d8 lightning or thunder damage. The enemy takes half damage on a save. If the enemy's already went, the lightning damage will be doubled. Just note, your reaction is generally contested. Before you click Wrath of the Storm, consider whether you need to save your reaction for something. Are you planning to use Luck of the Far Realms to guarantee a crit, or do you need to keep it for shield against enemies with high attack rolls? I do tend to use this on trash mobs when I don't really need the resource. As a cleric, you worship and pray to a deity. This is your campaign, so in all honesty, pick whatever. Selune to angrily make our Shadowheart, or a thematic pick would be the Stormward Talos. And let me tell ya, the dialogue is mental and goes harder than anything. No, seriously, this has "did I stutter" energy. Background will usually come down to personal preference. Maybe you're choosing for the flavor or vibes, in which case follow your heart. But if you're wanting to capitalize on the sorcerer's high charisma and go for those dialogue skills, there are a few things to consider. Clerics can choose insight and the widely used persuasion as their starting skill. Mummy Milkers is canonically a dark urge, so I'll be getting intimidation and medicine from the haunted one background. But if you're not feeling the urge, the soldier background also has intimidation, and the criminal and charlatan backgrounds both provide deception as well. Okay, let's move on to stat allocation. Strength is our dump stat. Relegated to 8, we are a spellcaster, and we have noodly arms as to be expected. However, our next stat, dexterity, is very important and is honestly my favorite in the game. This will be set to 16, which adds a +3 to initiative and to our dexterity saves. Heavy armor completely stops us from adding our dex modifier to our AC. I honestly value the +3 initiative highly enough that I will always recommend 16 dexterity. Our next stat, constitution, will be a healthy 14. It affects our hit point value and offers +2 to saving throws. With our core gameplay loop, we don't really concentrate on spells, and even then, not for extended periods. So 14 is honestly fine and will act as a buffer for mistakes in a playthrough. Ah yes, intelligence 8. We fry stuff to a crisp. There is no need for thinking during this adventure for the random int checks that matter to our build. We can just temporarily put on a headband. Okay, this might be the most heretical thing you see today. Wisdom is set at 10. But why, Evelyn? Doesn't the star mean something? Yes, you're very right in that regard. Just bear with me until the next stat, because our actual main casting stat will be charisma, maxed out at 17. It might not make sense right now, but the order of class selection is really important. In BG3, your casting modifier for spells is determined by the class that gained the specific spell. But for items and scrolls, will change depending on the last class you picked. To put simply, all items and scrolls will use charisma if we pick sorcerer after cleric, and there is an item we will use a lot, so it is paramount we have this as charisma. Multi-class casters are almost always multiple attribute dependent, mad, and run the risk of needing to juggle multiple modifiers for their spells to be impactful. I don't enjoy respecking multiple times as I level just to reallocate my stats, just so I can take advantage of different spell lists, and I won't ask you to do it either. As ever, if I've made any decisions here you disagree with, or if you would rather approach these early levels and stat allocations differently in your own playthrough, feel free to do so. And lastly, for level 1, let's go over prepared spells. The low wisdom makes my job and your choice simple. It's going to be the create water spell. At level 1, this creates a 4-meter surface that wets the enemy. One thing I see people miss is that upcasting this spell increases the area you can cover. Create water is the core spell for us, as wet enemies are vulnerable to lightning and cold damage, meaning they take double damage from those sources. As our main spells will be lightning, they will eviscerate pretty much anything in the game once you've set this vulnerability up. On the flip side of vulnerability is resistance. Wetting yourself can grant fire resistance, and in this footage we reduce this necromancer's fireball to a pitiful 7 damage by first succeeding the dexterity save to cut the 36 damage in half, then reducing it by half again with resistance, and reducing it by another 2 damage from our heavy armor choice. Now, create water is one of the few spells in the game that refreshes your action when combat begins, making it perfect for that vulnerability setup. Let me walk you through an example. Here, I ranged my Space Frog friends into a nice group. When I was happy with their positions, I put it into turn-based mode, showered them with create water, and finally the offhand crossbow shot to get their attention. And once combat starts, you might notice my bonus action is gone, but my action has returned, which is very nice. And one final note for create water is how it interacts with invisibility. Not only will it reveal invisible creatures without the need for a saving throw, you can cast it from invisibility to force surprise rounds on hostile creatures. Regaining your action back to take advantage of a surprise round is absurdly efficient and easily breaks the action economy in your favor, especially combined with boosts such as Bloodlust and Speed Potions. The Storm Sorcerer vs Draconic subclass situation's crazy. It's got me bamboozled and fumbling like a goober, trying to understand it. But anyways, after many hours of testing and research, let me present to you Storm vs Draconic Sorcerer. What's better? Let me preface this so I don't get death threats and harassment from the unemployed redditors. Both subclasses are valid and will carry your playthrough. Neither is better than the other overall, but they do shine in certain situations. I tried my best to emulate many scenarios and kept the receipts like a crazy ex-girlfriend holding on to messages, which you can find in the research notes, linked in the description and pinned comment. Without further ado, my adventuring sorcerers, let's settle the debate with conviction and find out why I'm choosing Draconic for this build. We'll start with Storm Sorcerer. From level 1, you get Tempestuous Flight. After casting a spell, you can fly as a bonus action without receiving opportunity attacks. Using a ritual spell, such as Featherfall, can proc this out of combat, giving it value in exploration, but also gives our bonus action a workout in combat, allowing us to kite enemies and reposition as needed. A godsend, especially in challenge runs, where extra mobility might be needed due to imposed restrictions. However, we're not here for that. We're here for the level 6 feature, Heart of the Storm. When you cast a spell of level 1 or higher that deals lightning or thunder damage, you cause a small local storm. All enemies within 6 meters take lightning or thunder damage equal to half your sorcerer level. Rounded down. Where do I even start? First of all, you don't even need to use a spell to trigger this effect. This can be a cantrip, so it's efficient, but the biggest takeaway is this is DRS. Oh, but Evelyn, what does this even mean? In the simplest terms, this feature gives us colorful additional damage lines. These lines are generated by items and abilities which I won't go into detail on for now, but just know that each individual enemy will be affected by each of these separate instances of damage. It's fun seeing disposable enemies pop when this effect goes off. Combine this with the Luminous Armor and Callous Glow Ring for a radiating orb generator, and the Glove of Battle Mage's power to gain acuity passively. This concept is quite potent in turning a Stormsork into a battlefield debuffer and controller thanks to your insane spell save. However, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Heart of the Storm requires a click to activate when you cast a spell, meaning it's a mutually exclusive choice between Destructive Wrath for max roll damage or some silly AoE shenanigans. That's not to discount it, however. This feature is still resourceless and efficient. And on top of all of this, the Storm Sorcerer's expanded spell list is excellent, especially as it gives you Create Water, meaning you have the choice of skipping the cleric levels if you want, and the inclusion of Sleet Storm and Core Lightning really round out the toolkit. Before we get too much deeper in the rabbit hole, let's see if Draconic can swing back. At level 1, the subclass gets Draconic Resilience. While not wearing armor, your base AC is 13. Using the Protective Sparks wall from the video, the AC value was actually comparable to the Adamantine Splint, a heavy armor. Not bad at all, and it works in conjunction with a shield. And like our rival, our level 6 capstone is quite significant. Draconic sorcerers gain elemental affinity damage whenever you cast a spell that deals damage of the type associated with your draconic ancestry. You add your charisma modifier to the damage. This modifier doesn't seem like much, but with vulnerability doubling the damage at the end, it starts to add up, and over several tests will deal more damage than Storm Sorcerer, with the exception of really niche and curated scenarios. So what is the conclusion? Draconic has a much lower barrier to entry with higher front-loaded damage thanks to the flat increase from Charisma. This provides consistently high damage rolls, while Destructive Wrath guarantees we maximize that damage when we need it most. It's also a simple, approachable playstyle, and reaching its full potential doesn't require a lot of thought or deep game knowledge, where a Storm provides less consistency by comparison, but has a higher ceiling under certain circumstances, coming at the cost of increased complexity. Heart of the Storm activates upon electrified surfaces, providing damage from further DRS activations and item interactions. This can debuff a massive area and provide passive acuity generation via a specific piece of gear. All this means is that in encounters with the highest mob density, Heart of the Storm can generate slightly slightly higher AoE damage. However, spending the additional turns to do a few more points of damage seems very inefficient when it can spend the same or less time blasting everyone with lightning bolt or chain lightning. The biggest deal breaker to me is this: even with Heart of the Storm set to non-ask, it will prompt, you can't max roll your lightning damage. It's either Destructive Wrath or Heart of the Storm. Most encounters in this game are over in the blink of an eye with the former. With that being said, here are my closing thoughts. I would pick Storm in moderate difficulty campaigns where I am expected to skirmish over several rounds. The surface DRS, debuffs, and acuity generation is very efficient with resources. However, in unmodded difficulties, even when playing solo, Draconic can annihilate most encounters with that high, consistent damage before anything can truly become a threat to your run. So for this video, we will choose Draconic Bloodline, but Shadowcute will be whipping up a storm with us later, just for testing purposes. For now, picking the Blue Dragon Bloodline will grant us Witch Bolt as a spell. Now I want you to pay attention here when I say this spell is very important to us. Why? First of all, let's look at the damage dice. It does 1d12 at level 1, and for every upcast level, does an additional 1d12. This is our highest damage dealing single target spell, and will be our main boss deleter. Not only that, but this spell is an attack roll. This means Witch Bolt can crit, and criticals double our damage dice. Add invulnerability to double the previous number, and the fact that we can guarantee the max damage roll and force a critical. Witch Bolt will devastate the majority of bosses and enemies in this game. Whilst we're still on the topic, let's talk about the recast. First off, something that catches a lot of people out is that your recasts are only 1d12 damage, no matter what level the initial cast was, unlike Core Lightning. However, it still has some potential. This recast is considered a cantrip and will interact with items or synergies that boost cantrips, such as the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation, Potent Robe, and our Elemental Affinity. The recasts aren't the greatest use of your action economy, but if you're so inclined, they can be helped along with some gimmicks. Gimmicks such as abusing the fact that we can still tether to our enemies at extreme ranges, allowing us to recast it out of combat for some shenanigans. Like with this little bit of speedrunner tech, you can move icons on your hotbar to allow you to recast faster. See how our icons are grayed out during the animation? By dragging an icon, you can bypass this cooldown period completely. As for our sorcerer cantrips, we'll start with the most important one, Minor Illusion. This is non-negotiable, and if you haven't used it before, you'll actually gain a lot of appreciation for this cantrip while playing this build. Minor Illusion is a cute, illusory cat that distracts your enemy. Yeah, relatable. It'd work on me as well. The enemies will walk towards the illusion, which is an interaction you can take advantage of. Let me show you an early level 2 example. The Intellect of Arrows can definitely rock you if you're unprepared. Here, Miss Milkers casts Minor Illusion to gather them closer to the Nautiloid tank. Once satisfied with the positioning, she enters turn-based mode, dips her arrow in fire, then lets loose. This seals the fate of an otherwise difficult foe early on. Minor Illusion can also be cast without breaking invisibility. This can grant you the time to lure your enemies to the perfect spot before initiating combat with Create Water, which I'll emphasize here again, will refresh your action on combat start. And since we cast it from invisibility, will surprise your enemies, giving you both a perfect setup, extra turn, and your action back. Yep, this is diabolical. We will also make use of Minor Illusion to obtain a very powerful armor piece early from a position of safety, giving you a huge boost to your early survivability. Do play around and sandbox with this cantrip, as you can do very silly things with it, whether it be distracting the goblin leaders to their death or abusing the fact that Balthasar is one of the few NPCs that doesn't return to his original location, meaning you can take your pet necromancer for a walk into the Faith Leap trial for an easy kill. Next on the list is Shocking Grasp. It's a melee cantrip and very resource efficient. The damage starts on 1d8 lightning, increasing to 2d8 at level 5, and finally 3d8 at level 10. The damage might seem small, but with Went, it's not too bad for a cantrip and can be abused later on to absurdity if you're into shock play. Its biggest strength is not the damage, however, but in its ability to remove a target's reaction. If an enemy gets up in your face, use Shocking Grasp to deny them then their opportunity attack and create some distance before turning back and following up with a bonus action. I would also recommend using Twin Cast with it for 2 enemies, as it only costs 1 sorcery point, or equally as cheap, extended Metamagic for both doubling the duration of the lost reactions or item effects. I'll go into more detail soon. Now that we have our melee cantrip, I like to balance it out with a ranged one, that being Ray of Frost. It deals cold damage and reduces the target's move speed by 3 meters. Great for ranged damage when we run out of spell slots, and it interacts with wet, meaning our cold damage is doubled against vulnerable targets. Ray of Frost will also freeze water, creating arenas for the enemy to try not to slip on. Any frozen surfaces created this way will force anyone crossing it to make a dex save based on their spell save DC to avoid landing flat on their ass. Our final cantrip is Friends. Advantage on charisma checks is a powerful buff in conversations. However, there are 2 downsides. Casting this on a companion will make them lose 10 approval when the effect ends, and on tactician and honor roll sets, this spell is considered a crime. If you're in the line of sight of the affected target when the effect ends, they will become hostile. So make sure you're somewhere safe, like back at camp, before ending the spell. This can be an honor run ender, so do be cautious. In all honesty, this will only end your run if you're forgetful like me at the ripe old age of 50, so returning to camp after conversations and cancelling concentration is something I try to be diligent about. Let's move on to a subject that costs resources: spells. The first spell we will pick is Chromatic Orb. It's quite versatile, as we can choose from various elements. At level 1, this spell does 2d8 damage, with the exception of Thunder, dealing 3d8. This value will increase by 1d8 per level when you upcast, so that means by default, Thunder Chromatic Orb deals more damage, except when considering vulnerabilities. Since our class kit is designed around the use of the wet condition, cold and lightning will come out on top. However, with that being said, I want you to examine and pay attention to enemy resistances and vulnerabilities to take advantage of this spell's versatility. For example, lava methods are weak to cold damage, woodwords are weak to fire damage, and those stupid scrying eyes that are annoying, very susceptible to getting clamped by a chromatic Thunder Orb. Whilst we're on this topic, some enemies will be completely immune to certain damage types, which we can't change. Others will be resistant to certain damage types, causing them to take half damage from their sources. If we apply Wet to those resistant to lightning or cold, it will strip that resistance, allowing us to do regular damage with those elements again. Chromatic Orb is also an attack roll, so that means we can land criticals with it. And finally, it's a great spell to use our twin cast Metamagic on, which we'll obtain very soon. Our second spell for this level is Shield. Shield adds a +5 to your AC and immunity to magic missile as a reaction to being attacked, which greatly increases your survivability. We're going to do our best to bolster our AC as much as possible early on, but some enemies still have fairly consistent hit rates. The Null Hunters in Githyanki immediately come to mind for me. This is a major boost to our survivability early and remains relevant throughout the game. However, it does use a reaction, so plan ahead if you're intending to use Luck of the Far Realms, or consider whether Wrath of the Storm would be more beneficial. For level 3, we take our second level in Sorcerer, and with that, we gain another spell, and my pick would be Magic Missile, shooting out 3 darts of 1d4 force damage that will always hit their target, provided they don't have shield. Upcasting creates an additional dart per spell level. I played this build start to finish, and my hit chance left something to be desired for some Act 1 enemies. This spell can help smooth out your combat by guaranteeing some damage while you're working on improving your hit rate, or even getting those sneaky foes who get out of line of sight. It can be quite powerful with gearing and optimization, which is beyond the scope of this video. However, we are going to at least beef it up a little with lightning charges and with an amulet for an extra dart. Even beyond that, Magic Missile stays relevant across the whole game, useful for certain encounters in Act 2 and 3. It does have some utility as well, such as breaking potions and healing yourself. Or if you're a tryhard like me, you can drop a speed potion by your feet, use a magic missile to both damage the enemy, and return that action back without the need to waste a bonus action on your speed potion. And lastly for this level, my favorite of the sorcerer's class features, Metamagic. Metamagics are additional effects we can add to spells to change the way they behave, and their associated resource cost are sorcery points. Note, they also work with scrolls, but they have to be in the main body of your inventory, not stored away in a container. No, I'm not making excuses for my messy inventory. It's practical, okay? If you've ever wondered why Metamagic doesn't work with scrolls, this might be the reason. I generally take extended and twin Metamagics first. Let's start with extended Metamagic, something I find to be very undervalued by the community. It only costs 1 sorcery point, and it doubles the duration of conditions, summons, and surfaces caused by spells. First, let's go over the intended simple use cases. We can extend the duration of Create Water to wet the enemy for 6 turns. There's no shame in lacking the confidence to end an encounter in under 6 turns, which this build is more than capable of, so I personally just use it to do a multi-turn setup between boss phases. We can also apply the same font to scrolls as well, useful for prolonged engagements, especially of choke points, keeping the enemy suffering for longer. Okay, let's go over why I think it's undervalued. Not only can we double the duration of spells, we can double the item interactions. At the risk of me sounding like a nerd, I'll give you an actual example to not sound so vague. We'll open easy and say any kill with extended enabled extends Bloodlust by another turn, giving you an extra action now and the start of your next turn. Next, let's go over an example while wearing the gloves of Belligerent Skies and the boots of Stormy Clamor. We're meant to be getting 2 reverberation per item, so 4 total. Now when we reach 5 stacks of reverberation, the enemy has to roll a save or fall prone, which will happen on the next spell we cast. But if we click this extended Metamagic, theoretically we should apply 8 turns of reverberation, right? Look, honestly I can't tell because the counter resets, but what I do know is that we forced a prone check on the enemy in a single cast. So what if you add in the Spine Shutter Amulet, meaning with 3 pieces it should be 6 reverb, and with extended that's 12, right? Okay, look at the log. At only 6 stacks of reverb, they rolled 2 saving throws to avoid falling prone, meaning that check happened twice. I've tested this with and without extended, and 6 is the magic threshold to impose a double prone save. Yeah, can you see why my videos are so long and I go insane trying to understand stuff? I have moved the rest of my ramblings to the tech section, where we explore more item interactions with extended Metamagic. And with relief, I'm glad to say our second Metamagic choice is simple. Twin Spell allows a single target spell to be also cast at a secondary target, costing 1 sorcery point per spell level. It's fairly efficient in terms of resource costs. I recommend using a chromatic orb if you're inclined to use a spell slot, or shocking grasp when the enemy is close together. The last class feature we gain at this level is the ability to create sorcery points and create spell slots. This allows one resource to be traded for the other, giving us a ton of flexibility. At level 4, we pick the final level with our Tempest the main cleric, granting us Channel Divinity, which can be used on 2 things. The first being Turn Undead. Basically all undead in a 9-meter radius have to roll a wisdom save, otherwise they'll spend the turns running away from you. For the purposes of this build, our Channel Divinity is quite a coveted resource and will be better spent on our next feature, Destructive Wrath. Whenever you roll lightning or thunder damage, you can use a Channel Divinity to deal the maximum possible damage. Then you add invulnerability such as Went, you double that number. However, remember my fixation on Witch Bolt? I like it because it uses an attack roll, meaning we can roll a critical and double our damage dice. Let's go over an example together. In today's class, we will use Witch Bolt. I've cast it at level 6. That means our spell will deal 60-12 damage, the maximum possible damage roll. Thanks to Destructive Wrath is 6 by 12, equaling 72 damage. There are many methods to force a critical in this game, and that's how we do. This 60-12 damage dice is doubled into 12d12, equaling 144, and the hallmark synergy of our build is Wet Vulnerability, doubling this final number. 144 times 2 is 288. This is just the raw number without any boost from our subclass, items, or damage riders. Throw all those little numbers in and they start to add up fast. Okay, classroom nerds, I might do well on paper, but let's go over some practical decision making during your adventure in regards to what to cast in an encounter. For single target, Witch Bolt is your highest damage spell thanks to its damage dice and ability to crit. For 2 targets, Twinned Chromatic Orb is the best option. Use Thunder if not applying vulnerability, or Cold or Lightning if wet, or Lightning Lightning if you choose to use Destructive Wrath, or Force a Crit, or both. For big groups, Lightning Bolt will be your go-to, or as an early tease for the late game, Twinned Chain Lightning. To finish the cleric leveling off, I do have one recommendation for your final prepared spell, Sanctuary. For a bonus action and a level 1 spell slot, you cannot be targeted by enemy spells or attacks. This can last 10 turns or until you perform a hostile action. Sanctuary is resource efficient and has a lot of value in several aspects. For example, in this footage, I was behind the curve on this Karna's fight and I needed a reset to catch up. By casting Sanctuary, it gave me room to heal up, let my lethargy from my speed push and wear off without consequence, and most importantly, give me the time to think up this game to get out of this mess. Here, I cast Create Water, which, as a non-hostile action, lets me keep Sanctuary. Once my enemies were went, I was ready to exit my bubble with a vengeance. It even has some utility outside of direct combat, such as the trial in Enz's dungeon. Level 5 onwards, we'll continue the game as Sorcerer until the very end. Makes it simple, right? Here, we gain access to level 2 spells, and for those who chose the Storm Sorcerer subclass, I suggest picking Witch Bolt here. For those who picked Draconic, our choice is kinda a whatever vibe here. That being said, I would recommend either Misty Step, Enhanced Ability, or Clouded Daggers. Misty Step is a great utility spell, allowing us to position defensively or offensively for the matter. This is at the cost of a level 2 spell and bonus action. However, the spell can be very replaceable with scrolls or items, and Clouded Daggers conjures, well, daggers I suppose, in an area, dealing 4d4 piercing and can be upcasted for an additional 2d4 piercing per level. This spell is good in choke points, pretty useful for the goblin camp or gnolls, or for breaking things when you're desperate for action economy. An option to consider to really help with the important checks is Enhance Ability, granting you advantage to all checks made of a single stat until long rest or until you lose concentration. This is especially useful for that specific intelligence check needed to pick up Marker Hesh here in Act 3, but there are enough dialogue checks and events in this game to make use of this spell. We also gain an additional choice of Metamagic at this level, and Quicken Spell is the pick here. For the cost of 3 sorcery points, you can cast a spell as a bonus action. Action economy is everything in battle, and Quicken allows incredible versatility and usage of your bonus action. For example, if your main action is not enough damage for you, or even a second action provided by Bloodlust or Haste, why not overkill things by weaponizing your bonus action as well? Also, for those forgetful 50-year-olds like me, it acts as a whoopsie, I forgot to create water button in an emergency. Level 6, we don't really get anything too exciting. Our cantrips will be the player's choice. That means you can pick whatever, sweetheart. But if you're feeling indecisive, I've narrowed it down to 2 choices. The light cantrip can help the player safely traverse areas of Act 2 affected by the lesser shadow curse without taking damage. However, its main use will act as an enabler to proc the effects of the Callous Glow Ring. That being said, Bernard's Guiding Light Ring will fill this niche as well. Equip the ring, cast light on your weapon, and unequip the ring for the same outcome. The last potential is Mage Hand. It can free up action economy and throw a water bottles for you. If micromanaging another cooldown ability and summon is too high key for you, yeah, it's understandable and not a big deal. In this guide, I'll be using hand crossbows anyway to make up for any impromptu wedding needs. But if you do indulge in picking Mage Hand, you can do some truly diabolical things with it. For example, I've drugged it and made it throw bosses to their deaths. Or you can force-feeded items Gale would normally eat to equip them. However, our version of Mage Hand only lasts 10 turns, and these shenanigans are kinda outside of the scope of this video. Our spell choice, I feel, can also be the player's preference, but if you're after a recommendation, I would suggest Blindness. Like it says on the box, it blinds creatures, which puts their attacks at disadvantage and attacks against them at advantage. What you perhaps may not know is that you can upcast this spell and select the same enemy multiple times. Many enemies can be severely hindered with this spell, and you can even burn through a few bosses' legendary resistances with it, like Wargaz, Balthasar, or even Gortash. As long as they do not have legendary resistance incapacitation, this trick will work. We may be a little late to get our first fate due to multiclassing so early, but better late than never. Dual Wielder will be our pick. It allows us to dual wield weapons that are not light, provided they are not two-handed. For our case, Yes, we'll be rocking dual staffs for most of the game for the bonuses they provide. This feat also gives us +1 AC while dual wielding. However, that being said, there is a way to glitch dual wielding without ever having the feat, but it do be a bit convoluted, and I tried my best to write it down in the most simple way in the on mode party template document included in this video. Welcome to level 7. Generally, you'll be around the Githyanki Creche at this point, and it's a good thing we get access to level 3 spells. I want you to snap pick Lightning Bolt. It deals 86 lightning damage in a large line and can be upcasted for 1d6 extra damage per level. Do note that if the enemy succeeds on a dexterity save, this damage will be halved. This will be your go-to spell if there are a large cluster of enemies. Let's go over two of the easiest ways to maximize its effectiveness. Scenario 1, your enemies are neutral, yellow status, cast minor illusion, and gather your enemies into a convenient pile. Once happy, turn-based mode. Create water, offhand attack to aggro, and enter combat. You may have consumed your bonus action, but luckily you regain your action to fry your enemies with a lightning bolt. Scenario 2. Your enemies are hostile. Red. Use invisibility. Cast minor illusion until satisfied. Enter turn-based mode. Then cast create water. This should surprise the enemy and give you another round of action economy. Not that you really need it. At level 8, we gain our Sorcerer subclass capstone features. For Draconic Sorcerers, we gain Elemental Affinity Damage, a passive feature that adds extra damage based on our Charisma modifier. At this point of the game, you should have +3 or +4. And for spell choice, we shall pick Counterspell. When an enemy casts a spell, you can use a reaction plus a desired level of spell slot to dispel it. It's very good practice to check the level of spellcast and counter it with the same level. If you're trying to counter a high level spell, you must roll a check to try to prevent it. This check is very janky and will not use our spellcasting modifier of Charisma. Instead, we'll use our intelligence modifier, which is an incredible -1. The formula is displayed on the screen. There are plenty of harmful spells that can hurt you and your party. The ability to deny such trouble is a massive help, although expensive. Level 9, we gain access to level 4 spells, and with all these fancy choices, I landed on Irestorm. Oh, but Evelyn, aren't we a lightning sorcerer? Okay, you're not wrong there, but let me redirect that energy into why I'm so obsessed with this spell. You see here, it has a 2d8 bludgeoning damage component and a 46 cold component as well. And since it has 2 instances of damage, guess what that means? That's right, 2 instances of item activations. Reverberation, doubled instances. Callous, double those as well. Remember my impassionate rambling about extended metamagic? Well, we can use extended on this spell, making the ice surface last 4 turns instead, but that's not what we care about. We care about doubling the already doubled instances from item procs. 4 radiating orb? Nah fam, try 8 in a single cast over an extremely large area. A -8 to attack your entire party is an extremely powerful debuff. Bear in mind this is surface level, pun not intended, item interactions, and I would love to hear what you cook up with this knowledge in the comments. Anyways, we're almost there. Level 10, let's pick a spell. I'm going to suggest Sleet Storm, one of my favorite spells. It covers a huge area in rain and ice and forces all casters in the area to make a concentration saving throw or lose concentration. It will refreeze and blast every turn. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know how much I love this spell. To cut my yapping down is the ice surface uses your spell save DC. Creatures walking on it will have the movement speed halved and fall prone on a failed dexterity saving throw. This spell can single-handedly solve many of the large encounters in the game. The Moonros Raid, Halson's Portal Defense, the Necrolab, and so on. The Goofy Slip, turn after turn, will personally never get old for me, and I cannot recommend this spell enough. Also a bonus fact, this can bypass legendary resistance on bosses. Do with that information as you will. Here is our second and final feat selection, and with that, I present you with 2 choices. The first being ability score improvement, adding both points to Charisma. We should be 20 Charisma naturally at this point, with the potential to get up to 24, basically a +5 or +7 respectively to our attack rolls, letting us hit more often, spell save DC, making our enemies save less and take full damage from Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning. And if you're of Draconic ancestry, you'll add that modifier again onto your damage. And my second potential choice is Alert. I promise this is not rage bait. Alert gives your character +5 initiative, and you can no longer be be surprised. At this point of the game, there are a few select enemies that do have pretty insane initiative, like Cazador with +10, Dollar +9, and Yu-Gi-Oh with +8. You definitely don't need alert to beat anyone in the game, especially if you're happy to collect some initiative gear and use vigilance elixirs before combat, then use your first bonus action to drink a different elixir. But if churning through elixirs and swapping gear around on an encounter basis is too high key for you, I get it, me too honestly. I like the passive nature of the feat already, but it really shines in a group setup. Your party can act together in unison, provided there are no enemies between you in the turn order. Combined with high initiative, you can gain advantage on the battlefield right from the start of combat, setting up powerful combos with control spells and damage. At level 11, we have actually reached the pinnacle of our adventuring power a little early. With our multi-class progression, we will have access to a level 6 spell slot. However, we will not have the choice of picking a level 6 spell. In all honesty, since we can twin cast the item version of Chain Lightning, but not the spell version, you're not really missing out on much. Also, the spell choice here is kind of a flex pick and player choice, as we're spoiled in this game with an abundance of high level scrolls. That being said, here are some suggestions. Hold 1 star can completely disable an enemy for a potential 10 turns, provided they don't save, and attacks within 3 meters are a guaranteed critical. And no honey, Chain Lightning or Lightning Bolt cannot crit. But hey, the held monster fails dex save, so I guess they will take full damage. I would use this spell as an enabler for party members, or if you expect to fight a boss for more than a turn. Cone or Cold. There's an extreme 8d8 damage, and as the name implies, in a small, short-ranged cone. I nickname it the Eye Shotgun, because combined with Wen, not many can survive a double barrel from this spell. And finally, I know this is a bit of a weird pick for this level, but Hypnotic Pattern. Your level 3 spell slots aren't so precious at this stage of the game, and being able to incapacitate enemies in a large radius for 2 turns gives you some time to set up your big attacks or get out of dodge. It's not groundbreaking, but it can be useful. And here we are, level 12, giving us our final choices of spells, Metamagic, and Sorcery Point. You've made all the big decisions now, and all that's left are a couple of stress-free choices. For the cantrips, it really doesn't matter what you pick here, so go with whatever your heart desires. Against spells, I reflex pick, refer to the choices I mentioned last level, and pick one. And lastly, a Metamagic choice. I would recommend Heightened Spell. The target of this spell has disadvantage on their saving throw. Combined with your high spell save DC, at this point of the game, it's very effective at shutting down dangerous enemies. The final part of this section is build variations, starting with the popular 6 Tempest Cleric and 6 Storm Sorcerer. Picking up a second use of your Channel Divinity is a big boost to your damage output in longer fights, or help with your cadence with the party by making your long rests go further. The Cleric spell list is just good in general, with solid options for offense, defense, and utility. But the big draw here is Call Lightning. 3d10 lightning damage in an AoE you can recast for the next 10 turns. This spell can be upcast for additional damage, and the recast will do the upcasted damage. Unlike Witch Bolt, not to be forgotten is Thunderbolt Strike, causing large or smaller enemies to be pushed back. Whenever you deal thunder or lightning damage to them, the 6th level in Storm Sorcerer will get you Heart of the Storm, a passive that adds half your sorcerer levels in damage to every enemy within a small area whenever you cast a lightning or thunder spell. This includes cantrips. It can be a lot of fun to play around with the electrified surfaces, especially combined with Spirit Guardians. You can even further combine this concept with the Gloves of Battle Mage's power to gain passive acuity. However, I do consider this split multiple attribute dependent. Early on, you'll use Wisdom for all Call Lightning casts, then your items in the Call Lightning recast will use Charisma. This will end up being a respec build purely to reallocate your stat points from a Wisdom priority from levels 1 to 6 over to Charisma when you pick up your first Sorcerer level at 7. A level 1 dip in Wizard grants you Spell Scribing. However, this makes your stat distribution and early game progression awkward, but you do get Lightning Bolt earlier, so it's worth it, right? This This is a respec build because it requires a specific order of class selection for the correct spellcasting modifier. But hey, at least you get to scroll up Chain Lightning. There are some things to consider if you choose this path. The main thing is that your scroll up spells will use your end modifier for their saving throws, while any sorcerer spells, scrolls, and items will still use charisma, making a build mad. This is not to dismiss the versatility of scribing spells, and you can get away with it by equipping the headband of intellect. You can prepare more spells, then unequip it to retain their spells, even with reduced intelligence. Storm Sorcerer, straight up, no nonsense multiclassing, simplicity at its finest. Giving up the cleric levels does limit your survivability options a little, which is mostly a consideration for solo playthroughs, but it does make you a little less resource dependent. By cutting out the channel divinity usage, you do get to pick your level 6 spell instead of having to rely on scrolls or items. Ironically, the item version of Chain Lightning is better since we can twin cast it, and our build has access to level 6 spell slots anyway, and the sorcerer spell list is great already, elevated by some of Storm's excellent subclass spells. Ultimately, you do end up sacrificing the guaranteed max roll damage for some AoE jank that's fun to play around with, especially in the higher mob density scenarios. Let's go over gear for a Tempest Sorcerer. The order will be top to bottom for simplicity, as everyone has different pathing in their playthroughs. Again, chapter markers are there for convenience, and the written reference guide for quick access. There will be a lot of choices in this section, and to further understand how they all tie in together, I'll go over specific examples in the gameplay section. Without further ado, our headpiece is the Shade Spell Circlet. You can purchase it from a Meloum, and yes, that's how his name is correctly said. I don't make the rules. To get access to his wares, you'll need to complete his quest. Head over to the Arcane Tower via your favorite route. There are so many ways to pass the turrets. However you choose to pass, we want to get these mushrooms at the side and follow them down to this lower level, grab a saucy flower, unlock the door, power the generator. Now you can use our lift to the next floor and grab all the Tongue of Madness and Timar spores and return to a Meloum. Accept the offer of a drink that looks truly delicious. Roll a few saves, and regardless of whether you pass or fail, you'll finally be able to trade for the circlet. This is well worth doing since you'll be returning to Meloum and Cloak for a few more gear pieces and consumables. The wearer of this item gains Shade Spell. While obscured, you gain a +1 to spell save DC. You know this effect is active when you have a dark cloud above your character's head. The game can be generous with what it considers obscured. We're picking this up very early when we don't really need it until we get Lightning Bolt, but there really aren't any other good caster helms in Act 1. Next is our chest piece. I'll go through a few pieces in order of progression so you know what to look out for. Right off the rip, I would recommend swapping to Lae'zel's Gift Yankee half plate with a base AC rating of 15+2 from our dexterity. 17 AC is looking pretty good for a while, especially throwing in a shield for 19. The Protective Spark Sword can be found in the Grimforge. I personally don't bother with all the traps and just use an enhanced leap or a misty step to reach the platform. The wearer of the Protective Spark Sword gains the following features: high spellcasting, giving you a +1 to spell save DC, and Spark Sword Armour, giving you a bonus +1 to AC and saving throws as long as you have lightning charges. Where are we getting the lightning charges from? From our boots or staff, which I'll go over soon. The Spark Sword Armour feature can also be condition locked, giving you the benefits without actually wearing the armor, but you need to be in combat to do so. I'll explain condition locking in the tech section later. As a final note here, Draconic Resilience will work with ropes and a shield, making your base AC 18 before lightning charges pushes it up to 19. Not bad for a caster, and only 2 points behind my top choice of armor. I would recommend wearing these robes in a party setting. However, for a restricted or solo runs, my preference would be for the next piece, that being the Adamantine Splint. Don't worry, we can actually obtain this very early on with our toolkit. This quest might be a little lengthy, but I'll walk you through the steps. You'll need the Splint mold from over here by the Forge waypoint, and a piece of mithril ore. One piece is just past the shallow lava channel. You can sneak through the channel and path all the way to the wall here to break the rock without triggering the methods here. If you choose to fight the methods, I have a few tricks you can try. Sneak into the lava channel, use your Fall Cloud spell or darkness, then stand up. You will be surprised but not drawn into combat. Once this condition ends, teleport to the waypoint or use a summon as a sacrifice to trigger the ambush. These lava methods are vulnerable to cold damage to take advantage of your chromatic orb or ray of frost. The second piece is down by the lava, past the animated armors. They're vulnerable to gravity or can be shut down by a saucy flower. Place the split mold in the chamber and the ore in the crucible. Pull the lever to descend the platform. Okay, there are many strategies on how to defeat this boss. However, I'm going to frame this method with this build in mind for early game access. You can do this at level 2 if you want to. Teleport back to the waypoint, stand on the ledge and shoot the lever. This will trigger the cutscene. Enter combat with Grim. Use your action to hide. On the following turn, use minor illusion to lure Grim over to the hammer. Once satisfied, I recommend using a bonus action crossbow shot to hit the lever, smashing the Grim with the hammer. This allows you to hide again on the same turn with your action. Lava methods will appear once you use the hammer on him. I would recommend just hiding and letting them fight it out, as the methods can be pretty spicy. Wait until the methods are dealt with and rinse repeat with hide, minor illusion and hammer. Once Grim is defeated, you can use the forge to make the adamantine splint armor. This armor has a hefty 18 AC and grants immunity to critical hits. Magical plate reduces all incoming damage by 2, and if the enemies are successful hitting you, the intense adamantine backlash causes said attacker to go reeling for 3 turns, giving them a -1 to attack rolls per turn remaining, aka 15% reduced chance to hit you. Quite honestly, I am obsessed with this armor, and let me tell you why. First off, the AC is pretty substantial, especially for a caster, reducing the probability of enemy attacks connecting. Next is crit immunity. It can take just a single unlucky crit to wipe your character, something that's happened to me many times. I prefer to prevent such variants where I can and from as early as possible. Then there's the -2 damage reduction. AC is a good defense. There is no denying that, but in a game of probability and chance, you will eventually be hit. Damage reduction on its own is great, but combined with resistances lets you shrug off damage without a care. Let me give you some examples. Blade Wand gives physical resistance, and a lot of Act 1 attacks will tickle you if they hit. You can wet yourself, AO, and gain fire resistance. Remember our necromancer friend from earlier? And lastly, if you have a very kind cleric to cast Warding Bond on you, you gain resistance to all damage. You can force some enemies to do nothing and skip their turn if the game AI calculates that it can't actually damage you for resistance and mitigation. In all honesty, this can literally be your chest slot all game. Crit immunity, AC, attacker debuffs, and damage reduction all in a single item slot is insane value. And I'll keep using it throughout Act 3 because it saves me opportunity costs with other slots. Sorry for going on for a bit. What can I say? A woman in armor is hot, and the caster in full armor is an immaculate vibe I can get behind. Okay, next slot of gloves, and there are a few here. I promise it won't be as dense as the armor. The gloves of missile snaring can be purchased from Aaron, who is found at the Grove. They'll grant you the missile snaring reaction, allowing you to intercept ranged attacks and reduce the damage by 1d10 plus your dexterity modifier. Combined with the damage reduction from your armor, you literally couldn't care less about the damage from the few ranged attacks that make it past your AC, especially useful against the additional damage from the Goblin's Fury with the small feature or attacks from Githyanki archers. These gloves will hold you over until the mountain pass, as the next 2 gloves can be found in the Githyanki creche. The Daredevil gloves can be bought from Jira. The passive Doom Lobber simply grants a +1 to attack rolls, which definitely improves our less than desirable hit rate on Witch Bolt and Chromatic Orb, and the toggle features Daredevil Proximity, allowing you to make ranged spell attacks as melee spell attacks. This toggle passive might help you land your hard-hitting attack spells when the enemy is close, or if you're a Magic Club gamer, One Shot Merkle. And our last glove choice, the gloves of Belligerent Skies. These can be found in a chest in the Inquisitor's chamber. You can either do a cheeky steal or fry the space frogs with lightning. With the gloves of Belligerent Skies equipped, when the wearer deals thunder, lightning, or radiant damage, inflict 2 turns of reverberation. Each turn of reverberation reduces the enemy's strength, dexterity, and con saving throws by 1. When they reach 5 or more turns of reverberation, they take 1d4 thunder damage and are forced to succeed a DC 10 con saving throw or fall prone. Two things to note here. First, the 1d4 thunder damage is a damage rider source. And second, by the time you impose the save, the reverberation debuff makes it effectively a DC 15 due to the -5 already inflicted. If you're not sure which to pick, reverberation is by far the most useful overall, but might require setup, whereas the Daredevil have the melee flexibility and increase the hit if you're struggling to land your attacks. As for the boons, we have two choices on what to wear for Act 1, but I recommend picking them both up when the gearing shifts in Act 2. The Water Sparkers can be found in a chest or right next to Minthara. If you want to obtain them passively, Darkness works wonders, or if you choose to battle her, a thrown speed potion on the ground beforehand is your friend. Just please be careful of her hold person. It will end your solo run. Not that I mind her holding me. The Water Sparkers have two features. Standing in water during combat creates electrified surface. You gain 3 lightning charges. Since our combat loop almost always opens with us casting Create Water, we gain the benefits on battle start. Lightning charges gives us a +1 to attack rolls and adds an extra 1 lightning damage to our attacks. Once we reach 5 charges, the next time we deal damage, we consume them and deal 1d8 extra lightning damage. A few things to note here. This lightning damage is doubled thanks to vulnerability. That 1d8 lightning damage is also a damage rider source. In layman's terms, it adds more lines of damage and colors to your combat log, increasing the amount of damage you do. And lastly, as a negative, electrified surfaces also electrocute you. However, we can be immune to that once we get a certain ring. The Boots of Stormy Clamor can be purchased from a Malloum when the wearer inflicts a condition upon a hostile target. They'll also inflict 2 turns of reverberation. So the thing to note here is that what the game considers a condition is incredibly generous, from missing an attack to getting them wet, AO, or hell, even scrunching your nose at them. You'll be proccing this effect. My favorite hands-off and quite literally brain-off method for consistently procking a condition is via the Illithid Power ability drain, but that certainly will not be everyone's preference. These work particularly well with the Gloves of Belligerent Skies, both granting 2 stacks per cast, making it 4 stacks in a round. However, if you just click on the extended Metamagic toggle, you can double this to 8 reverberation from a single Witch Bolt and force this check on your enemy in a single cast. I find this very efficient and I'm obsessed with it. Do try it out. These boots have much higher value in extended encounters, and when we have access to Dual Wielder to gain lightning charges, the debuff from Reverb and the DRS is invaluable in big skirmishes and in party setups. For your main hand weapon, we have Mel's First Staff. You can purchase this from Blurg at the Myconid colony. For wielding it, it grants you a +1 to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. Not too bad, and it helps with trying to connect our spells, especially this early on in our adventure. Regarding our offhand slot, we'll be pretty much using a shield until we get our dual wielder feat. Honestly, a specific shield doesn't really matter. We just want it for the +2 to AC. But since you asked so nicely for a recommendation, the Safeguard Shield can be purchased early on from Damon in the Emerald Grove, simply featuring +2 AC and +1 to saving throws. Once we get our dual wielder feat, we will change over to the Spell Sparkler, which can be obtained by helping Floric at Wukine's Rest. Simply break down the door and head outside of her. Then you'll be rewarded with a choicer weapon. It grants you the feature Electric Veins. Whenever you deal damage with a spell or cantrip, gain 2 lightning charges. This stuff is great with multi-hit abilities such as Magic Missile. It's very cathartic to see the lightning charges stack up quickly. The first amulet we'll look at is the Pearl of Power, purchased from a Malloum at the Myconid colony. Basically, the whole point of this amulet is you can restore a spell slot, but only up to level 3 per long rest. However, if you're inclined, you can bypass this restriction with Regen Refreshing, meaning you can regain as many spell slots as you have the patience for. The second amulet, and probably the one you'll have equipped most often, is the Psychic Spark, purchased from Blurg. And have you noticed a pattern of these two blokes selling us a lot of gear? This necklace grants 2 features. The first being Magic Magic Missile as a level 1 spell, rechargeable on long rest. Wow, cool. However, what is a big deal is Psychic Missiles. Shoot an additional dart whenever you cast Magic Missile via any method, not just the rechargeable version I just mentioned. Magic Missile can be genuinely quite useful in the early game, so this neck is something I'd recommend. However, it really needs some help from lightning charges, reverb, and even Falara Lu's Shriek ability to make it something that can truly carry a fight. While that is beyond the scope of this guide, I will include it as a variant in the Honor Mode build PDF linked in the description. I suggest keeping this equipped whenever you're not planning to use the Blast Pendant, which brings me to the Blast Pendant, which can be found on the Drow Dawn in the Underdark. However, the fight with the Spectator can be pretty difficult in Honor Mode. I suggest attacking a Petrified Drow from the Selûnite outpost. This will trigger the cutscene and the surprise round on you. However, you're far enough away that it doesn't drag you into combat. As for the Spectator fight, pop an Invis Potion. Open up with Create Water. Pick a level 3 Witch Bolt, max rolled, and crit. Yeah, the fight is over. All this to obtain the Blast Pendant with its Lightning Blast ability. For the cost of a bonus action, empower your next cantrip or spell to deal lightning damage equal to your remaining lightning charges. A few things to note. This Lightning Blast condition lasts 2 turns, so you can use that time to set up. The tooltip says it works with lightning spells, but it actually only requires lightning damage, which we get from lightning charges no matter what damaging spell we actually use. So no matter the element, this item's effects will trigger that, and this is insane DRS. I mean, it's very high key if you really want to push it to its limits, but the lowest barrier to entry I can give you is Electrify Water with the Water Sparkers. Start combat with 3 lightning charges. Pop this bad boy, then annihilate your foes. The cadence can be awkward as well, as it is a long rest cooldown item. However, it can be region refreshed if you want to dopamine hit more often, but is best saved for big bads. The Ring of Protection you'll find as early as the Druid Grove, but it takes a little effort to get and is very easy to miss. I'm going to briefly go over 3 consistent methods here. Before you do anything else, you need the quest. The simplest way is to save Arabella from Korga and disguise yourself as something short enough to enter the hideout down here. Once inside, Mole will ask you to steal the idol of Sylvanas as revenge for threatening Arabella, which you need to agree to. The first method is the steal. This is my preferred method, but it can be risky, so be warned. Simply walk up to the idol, drop a fog cloud onto the pedestal, and don't hit any NPCs in its radius. Grab the idol and immediately return to camp. Now quickly open the map and use any waypoint before returning to the grove. Don't hang around in camp for too long, and don't use the leave camp button, or you'll trigger the Grove Massacre. Assuming no one is dead, return the idol to Mole for your reward. The second method is confronting Korga. Read this half-torn note from Korga's locked chest behind the bookcase in the sanctum to trigger a journal update. All the way out to Neffel Swamp, you'll find a fairly tough fight with ancient mud methods and wood wounds. Focus the ancient mud methods as much as possible, as their death kills any methods they've summoned. Just don't get caught in the chain explosions when they die. You can pick off the wood wounds with chromatic orbs of fire to stop their regeneration ability. Grab the note hidden in the big tree stump and return to confront Korga at the grove. The outcome of this conversation doesn't matter. The Druids will stop their ritual regardless, and you're free to grab the idol and return to Mole. And finally, dealing with the goblin leaders. You should be capable of pushing up to 130 damage at this point, so this should be no problem. But a few things to consider. As long as you're not an elf, half-elf or paladin, Glut can be separated from the rest of the camp and killed by Corilla if you get branded and drink her EP time concoction. Minthara has Hold Person, which is a terrible time for you if she gets to use it, and probably a wipe playing solo. Deal with Draw Ragsland last, as his death makes the entire camp hostile. You can help house in or not, it doesn't matter. And with the leaders dead, you can return to the grove and find he's rescued himself, no problem. However you get it, hand the idol into Mole before the tieflings leave the grove, and she'll reward you with the Ring of Protection, granting you a +1 AC and saving throws. This is the perfect set and forget item for survivability. Although simple on paper, this singular digit could mean the difference between getting hit and managing to mitigate some nasty outcomes during your adventure. Our last ring is called the Spark Swirl. You can find it in a chest in the basement of the Arcane Tower. There are 2 ways to get into the basement, by Misty Stepping or a flight potion. You can bypass the door to the basement here, or if you read the Fredbear book in the greenhouse level, then the Roads to Darkness book in the corner of the bedroom level, you can finally ascend to the top level and talk to Bernard by picking options 1, Who art thou, friend? A rescue from my lonely wake. Then option 1 again, How can I trust? How will I ever know? How can I show myself my darkest me? Bernard will give you the Guiding Light Ring, which you can equip to reveal the basement level button on the elevator. While we're on this note, I might as well go on this tangent. This ring gives you the light cantrip and will be an enabler for an additional ring interaction in Act 2. Basically, we'll equip it, put light on a weapon, then unequip it. Anyways, the Spark Swirl will be down in the basement. The ring is quite simple. It gives you resistance to lightning damage, but the Spark Blocker feature will give you immunity to being electrocuted. Electrocuted entities take 1d4 damage at the start of each turn, but if they're wet, it's 2d4. This is the synergy I mentioned when we were talking about the water Sparker boots. Basically, when we open combat, we electrify the water and gain lightning charges and can't be electrocuted. For our range slot, I actually prefer hand crossbows. Keep a lookout for these green +1 enchanted hand crossies. I tend to find them in Damon's or Dara's shop. Did you know you can dual wield these? Basically, these are here as a way to use our bonus action productively. You'll find a lot of the time we have this bonus action spare, and you might as well do something with it. Enemy too close, Shocking Grasp, disable the reaction, meaning you can move away without taking an opportunity attack to disrespect them with an offhand shot. It's not just damage. If you forget to wet an enemy, use it to shoot a water bottle. Or if you're feeling naughty, you can drop a void bulb on the floor and move it around for no action cost, then shoot it with your bonus action to activate it. The main reason I prefer these is to start combat encounters with neutral NPCs with my action intact. An alternative is the Bow of Awareness. You can purchase this bow from Roa Moonglow, which gives you a +1 to initiative rolls. Since BG3 uses a 1d4 system to determine its initiative rolls, our dexterity modifier of +3 and the bow's +1 is a substantial early boost, and more often than not, you'll find yourself near the top of the turn order, aside from a few enemies in Act 1. Most players will make mistakes, and initiative is a good buffer for such situations. Let's discuss consumables, starting with elixirs. I want to preface this by saying you do not need these for a successful on-a-mode run, and I do understand the tedium regarding collecting these elixirs and using them daily. This is especially true on a high resource caster build, but this section is here if you want to squeeze a bit more out of your caster, but yeah, definitely optional. The Elixir of Vigilance can be purchased from vendors that have the alchemy table. My first stop in Act 1 is Dereth. These give you a +5 to initiative, and you can't be surprised. Pretty much the alert feat in a bottle. Bloodlust, granting you 5 temporary HP and an additional action once per turn when you kill an enemy. I'll talk about these more in Act 2, but just make a note to pick them up if you see them, as they spawn quite rarely. Also, hold on to any wolf fangs you find. You'll need them if you want to craft these elixirs. Have you heard of my gremlin daughter, Shovel? Well, she's not technically a gremlin, just in spirit. You'll find the Summon Closet scroll in a casket beneath the Apothecary cellar. Draconic is the only sorcerer subclass Shovel isn't afraid of. So as a Draconic sorcerer, pick the last option. Considering your stench, you can't judge. She'll ask if you're her new master. Choose 2 options to follow up. Your name Shovel? Shovel is fine. Then talk to her again to permanently gain her summon. For our Storm Sorcerer friends, well, I hope you're a Dragonborn, or you're going to need to respec. Shovel has 2 jobs. Going invisible, running up to enemies, enemies and hitting them to start the surprise round, especially when you're planning to use your blast pendant or just being fodder for your bloodlust potion. She might have a short rest cooldown, but you know, you can regen refresh to bypass that. The next lot of consumables are water bottles. Purchase in bulk from Auntie Ethel. They're kinda a whoopsie, I forgot to cast create water option. Basically, drag a bottle of water out of your inventory and drop it next to an enemy. This does not cost an action, and use your offhand crossbow shot to shoot it and wet your enemy, conserving your action to zap said enemy. Oh, if you're having trouble reaching your water bottle, consider item flinging. Now pay attention class, these next two potions can mean the difference between a trip back to the main menu or safely progressing. If at any time things go south and you have a bad gut feeling, consider using these. The first being a potion of invisibility. These are found throughout the world and at various vendors. If things ever go wrong, just pop an invis potion, move some distance away from your last known location and let the enemy detect presence to end the fight. That's universal advice for everyone. However, for the Tempest Sorcerer, it allows you to use minor illusion to safely reposition the enemy, then cast create water, starting the battle with everyone wet and surprised. Now I think the most important crunch for a lot of honor runs would be speed potions, which you'll need hyena ears to craft. You can find them on hyenas. Shocking, I know. Knolls and any vendor who sells potion regents. For the cost of a bonus action, you gain the effects of haste for 3 rounds, meaning a +2 to AC, additional move speed, and an extra action. However, when this 3rd round ends, you will gain the lethargic condition, basically missing out on your next turn. This is quite the devastating side effect, and I would strongly suggest taking an additional speed potion at the very end of your turn when this counter reaches 1. This will refresh the counter and end your turn immediately, but you will have your turn next round. Yeah, this stuff is addictive. Also, you can preemptively use Sanctuary to safely sit out your turn, or you know, you could just use the move speed to flee combat. Next, let's discuss Illithid Powers. Again, you definitely don't need these abilities for a successful run, but they offer you some powerful options, especially for our Tempest Sorcerer. With the amount of damage we're capable of putting out, it can be almost game-breaking to guarantee a critical. Far too tempting for me to give it up. Here are some Illithid Powers I recommend you pick up should you choose to do so. Favorable beginnings. The first attack roll or ability check you make against any target gains a bonus equal to your proficiency bonus. This is great for helping our first attack roll connect in an impactful way, turning the title battle, and has synergy with our next Illithid power, Luck of the Far Realms. For the cost of a reaction, once per long rest, you can change the successful attack roll into a critical hit. Okay, let's break down why this is so cracked. You are guaranteeing a critical hit. Critical hits double your damage dice. Destructive Wrath guarantees the lightning damage will be the maximum possible. The wet condition doubles the lightning damage. The spells in our repertoire that have attack rolls and can therefore crit are Witch Bolt and Chromatic Orb. Chromatic Orb is your go-to when you want to crit on 2 targets. However, Witch Bolt will be your primary consideration as it does the most damage dice in a lightning spell. It's absolutely diabolical what you can do with this Illithid power combined with our Destructive Wrath. I mean, you can one-shot most bosses if you wanted to. Cold or Weak is an exceptionally powerful Illithid ability I enjoy using. When you bring a creature down to fewer hit points than the number of Illithid powers you have, it dies and all nearby creatures take 1 to 4 psychic damage. To put simply, the more space gummies you eat, the more likely your enemies are going to explode when you damage them. This is great for fresh holding many enemies at once with Lightning Bolt or Magic Missile, and I personally love using this to destroy the portals in the Gauntlet of Shah. If I got $1 for every time someone asked me, what is that purple bubble around their character in the live chat or comments, no joke, I'd be over $1,000. Anyways, this purple bubble is called Shield of Rolls, and it gives you 10 temporary HP, but what really stands out to me is that if any enemy manages to go through this temporary HP, the shield pops, and the enemy has to roll a DC 15 intelligence saving throw or become stunned. A handy emergency button for your adventure. Lastly, ability drain. drain once per turn. If your attack hits the enemy, you will drain the charisma by 1 point. Just note that this is relevant to the attack you used. So most of the time, your spell attacks will drain their charisma, but the occasional offhand crossbow shot will drain their dexterity. Honestly, this is just here as a lazy way to proc the condition requirement on the boots or stormy clamor. Let's go over a few buffs that will help our Tempest Sorcerer in Act 1, starting with what I call the Glut and Gut combo. There is a way to get an extra 2 AC for no concentration for your entire party. You only need 2 ingredients for this to work. The first being Priestess Gut's body. The least troublesome way to collect this item is to drink a potion, fall asleep, and let Corilla murk her. Warning, this will not work if you're Elven, Drow, or Paladin. You could deal with her normally, or by yeeting her to this cheeky death pixel where you can still pick up her body. Next, progress to the Myconid colony and pick up your second ingredient, Glut. Find a suitable space outside of the village, because what we're going to do is pretty unholy and will probably piss off the NPCs and gatekeepers in the comments. Place Gut gently on the ground. Reanimate Gut with Glut. Then select Gut and use her Shield of Faith on your desired character. Okay, so some fun facts here. This version of Shield of Faith does not have concentration, so you can cast it as many times as you want. That means plus 2 AC for your entire party if you like. And you can dismiss the Glut and Gut pair if you don't want to babysit them. Yeah, do be a little silly. Oh whoa, what's this? 17 in charisma. Time to change that. Here's how I fought the hag with this build. I drank an elixir of vigilance for plus 5 initiative, went invisible, and opened up with create water, which ends her invisibility. I walk away to take a reaction resource from her. Next, I cast a level 3 lightning chromatic orb. Combined with luck and destructive wrath, this will do 130 damage. And with my remaining bonus action, I cast Sanctuary and moved as close as I could to her. That's the hag fight done. However, there are some considerations. Even with a vigilance elixir, her plus 7 initiative is high enough for a good chance to beat our plus 8. Sometimes you will miss your attack, but that's a skill issue. Not much to be done about that. With the hag here, we will boost our charisma by 1, and at 18 charisma, that is a plus 4 to attack rolls, spell save, and damage. Also with the 6th level in Draconic Sorcerer, this plus 4 will be added to lightning damage a second time, which is something to look forward to. Just as a note, if you're playing in a party and don't know who to give the hair to, remember there is also a chance to grab a plus 1 to charisma in Act 3. And lastly for buffs is the Safefisk, also known as the Gamer Chair. I'm pretty low key with the checks here. You have resistance, and if you can be bothered, we're saving throw boosting items to increase your chances of success. You gain the Awakened feature, which means you can use Illithid Powers as a bonus action. Useful for sure, but we're mostly going to sit on this feature until Act 3, where we can get a certain partial Illithid ability. Here are some in-game examples of how to play the Tempest Sorcerer in battle. This is to tie together some of the concepts I've been yapping about and perhaps provide some inspiration for your playthrough. The gnolls can be a bit of a nuisance, especially the hunters who have a triple attack, which is diabolical. However, the Adamantine Splint and Blade Wand, their attacks tickle us, as the piercing damage is first halved by the Blade Wand, then reduced by a flat 2 by the Armour's Magical Plate feature. Blade Wand is a 2-turn duration. However, you can extend that by a Metamagic, or end your turn before the casting animation finishes to squeeze an extra round in. How about we go hunt a Gnoll Alpha, an Invisible Shovel, struck Flint, setting up a surprise round. Ms. Milkers carefully snuck her way around the vision cones, and once happy with her position, opened up with Create Water. This starts her combat round, her action intact, and her enemies vulnerable to lightning, which she puts to great use with a level 3 Witch Bolt, max rolled with a force crit. With the bullet, I threw a speed potion on the ground, went off to the side to dodge the burrowing quake, then popped Invis. This Invis allowed me to open up with a surprise wet round, starting us off with 3 lightning charges thanks to our boots. Our heroine stepped in the splash speed potion to gain an action point. She then consumed her lightning charges to empower her blast pendant, and blast she did with a level 3 witch bolt, max rolled thanks to destructive wrath. Not to mention this was a lucky natural individual crit as well, dealing 146 damage and stripping the bullet of its scale armor. And with our remaining action, we guaranteed a crit on Witch Bolt, thanks to Luck of the Far Realms, to finish off the Land Shark. Not bad for level 5. As for the Inquisitor, first I turned off the lights, not only to set the mood, but also to get the buff from Shade Spell. The Giff are nasty, and that +1 could really make a difference with this spell save DC. Then I summoned Shovel, and she turned invisible. I threw a speed potion on the ground, and started maneuvering everyone with Minor Illusion until they were nicely lined up. I then wet everyone, including myself, while being deliberate to avoid Shovel as to not break her invisibility. Careful not to step in the puddle, Shovel attacks the Inquisitor, triggering a surprise round and allowing me to one-shot the Inquisitor with a level 4 Witch Bolt, boosted by a crit and Destructive Wrath for maximum damage. Welcome to Act 2. We are sticking with most of the gear we picked up in Act 1 and building upon those core concepts. Also in Act 2, I will be accompanied by Shadowcute, who will be the same build but with the Storm Sorcery subclass for a side-by-side comparison. Don't worry, this build is more than capable of carrying solo. I'm just down bad for women, and filming solo again was getting lonely. Again, top to bottom, starting with the head slot. The Fistbreaker Helm can be purchased from Land Half and Moonrise Towers. I highly recommend taking advantage of the charisma check here for discounted pricing. The Fistbreaker Helm gives you a +1 to spell save DC and initiative rolls. This is a straight upgrade over the Shade Spell Circlet for a flat, always active buff. In Act 2, we finally get our first cloak piece, and I recommend the Cloak of Protection, which can be purchased from Kali. Like the Ring of Protection, it adds a +1 to your armor class and saving throws. Deceptively simple, but it helps to efficiently scale the survivability of our class. For our armor slot, I don't recommend changing anything. Oh, but Evelyn, surely there are upgrades here. It's a new act after all. Yeah, you'd think that. The robes I know you're thinking about aren't an upgrade of the ones we found in Act 1. If you're in a party or focused on damage and comfortable setting up your lightning charges, the Protecty Sparks Wall is still the way to go. If you're solo or more defensive minded, I still recommend the Adamantine Splint Armor. However, if you're in a caster heavy party and really desperate for another robe option, consider the Robe of Exquisite Focus, purchased from Mirage and Moonrise Towers. The wearer simply gains a +1 to spell save DC without the need to have lightning charges, which kind of happens sometimes if you have a skill issue. For our glove slot, the Gloves of Belligerent Skies will be our choice. In Act 2, enemies will start having higher health pools, and in larger skirmishes, Reverb will be very useful, from debuffing mobs of enemies to putting Rampart on the ground. And while the thunder damage isn't high, it's not too shabby since it acts as DRS. As for our boots, we will swap between two. First, the Water Sparkers will be our default. If there's any fight we can open up with Create Water, or we enter a water surface in combat, we electrify it and have an instant free lightning charges to empower our spells. It's a low effort boost to our damage and attack rolls right from the start, giving us a front-loaded offensive setup. Synergizing well with the Callous Glow Ring, we'll use these to provide additional damage by electrocuting enemies who walk on this surface and to one-turn encounters. However, once we start having engagements that last more than a turn, I believe the Boots of Stormy Clamor have more value. Combined with other synergistic gear, like our gloves and a neck, which I'll discuss shortly, we can use a single extended Ice Storm to inflict almost maximum debuff stacks on entire groups of enemies, reducing the chances of making their strength, dex, and con saves, or insta-prone enemies with an extended Witch Bolt, resulting in survivors rolling around on the floor with disadvantage on their reduced dexterity saves. While we line up a Lightning Bolt, they're more likely to take the full brunt of. Not to mention, the Thunder DRS line is especially useful if you want to squeeze out that extra damage. As for which boots to wear in what scenario, usually for big mob fights, I tend to wear the Water Sparkers. The electrified surface and instant lightning charges will devastate such encounters. The Boots of Stormy Clamor I switch to for boss fights. The thunder damage from Reverberation can be triggered in one extended cast of Witch Bolt, and the Water Sparkers electrified surface can start to become a hazard for your party on longer encounters. Okay, moving on to weapons. Our main hand remains the same. The +1 to spell save DC and spell attack rolls is too good to pass on. Spell saves start to become more relevant as we have access to Lightning Bolt and Ice Storm. The enemy will take full damage if they fail their dexterity saves and half if they succeed. So it is in our best interest to bolster this stat, and that +1 to spell attack rolls could make the difference between connecting that witch bolt or wasting your channel divinity. The spell sparkler remains our offhand. The lightning charge generation and an extra 1d8 lightning DRS is very productive to our damage output. Not to mention we have +1 to attack rolls as long as we have these charges. However, if you feel like a change and want more AC, put on the water sparkers and consider these shields. The Sentinel shield can be purchased from Land Half at Moonrise Towers. It comes with +2 AC and the heightened awareness feature, giving you a +3 to initiative rolls and advantage on perception checks. The stand-up bonus definitely being that +3 initiative. Act 2 has a few high initiative enemies. Jerengov, Balthasar, and Yugia immediately come to mind. Even if you generally prefer to dual wield, consider popping the shield on before battle starts to get the alpha strike on those foes. Now this next trick seems alright but you hear it if you ask me. Tally sells the Shield of Devotion, which has this really unique intended feature that can make our lives much easier. When you equip the shield, you gain an additional level 1 spell slot, which you then can convert to sorcery points. Even better, you get that additional spell slot every time you re-equip the shield. You can probably see where this is going. We converted all our spell slots to sorcery points, and all sorcery points to level 2 spell slots. The game remembers how many spell slots you've created, and after taking a girl nap using our Angelic Reprieve potion, we wake up with more spell slots than we know what to do with. And after repeating this loop a few times, nice. And lastly, near the end of Act 2, and unmissable, is Kefrik's Shield. The most notable and important feature is the +1 bonus to spell save DC and spell attack rolls. A great boost for a spellcaster. You can't go wrong with the shield. For our neck pieces, we will still use 2 of our earlier amulets. The Blast Pendant will only be put on for major encounters. The Pearl of Power amulet for spell slot restoration. However, we will be adding to our jewelry collection with the following pieces. The Spellcrux amulet can be obtained by defeating the warden in the Moonrise Tower prison. Just whatever you do, do not wet yourself in front of her. Just ask me how I know. The Spellcrux amulet can restore a spell slot of any level once per long rest. You can bypass this restriction with region travel. However, this is dependent on both your appetite for cheese and your patience with loading screens. Okay, maybe onto an amulet that actually does something for all the other encounters. The Spine Shudder amulet can be obtained by defeating the Mimic in Isabel's room on the upper floor of Moonrise Towers. The Mimic shouldn't really pose a problem for you at this point of the game. Just don't forget the Paladin and the Eye patrolling the hall outside. The wearer of the Spine Shudder amulet gains crackling resonance whenever you deal damage with a ranged spell attack. Inflict 2 turns of reverberation on all targets hit by the attack. Okay, so remember all our reverb gear. The gloves add 2 stacks and the boots add 2. And finally, our neck adds 2 for a total of 6 stacks. Theoretically, we should be able to do the prone check and damage in one cast, as we only need 5 for that, right? Okay, do you see that? 2 impose saving throws from a single cast, generating 6 stacks of reverberation. I have no idea why, extended or not, 6 is the threshold. This game keeps me up at night. If the enemy gets proned, they all have to spend half their movement speed to get up, making it especially useful for kiting enemies. Or while they're laying on the ground, they'll have disadvantage on dexterity saves, making it the perfect time to capitalize on a Night Storm or Lightning Bolt. Our Tempest Sorcerer loves jewelry, and the rings are no exception. We'll start off basic and say that the ring of protection is still relevant. +1 AC and saving throws is a very safe and consistent boost to your survivability. That being said, I do like to pair the next 2 rings together. The first ring is the Callous Glow Ring. You'll find this in the Gauntlet of Shah, inside the vault next to Balthasar's chambers. This door is an extremely difficult DC 30 sleight of hand check. Consult your best faith or use the knock scroll to bypass it. Inside are 3 chests, one of which contains a Callous Glow Ring. Whenever the wearer deals damage to an illuminated creature, deal 2 additional radiant damage. To proc this effect, simply cast light on a weapon. This can be from a cantrip or via the Guiding Light Ring, obtained from Bernard. You can simply unequip the Guiding Light once you're done with it and still have it active. Now this 2 radiant damage might not sound like much, but it is a great damage rider, meaning anytime we have multiple instances of damage, it will repeat. For example, Magic Missile with multiple darts, or Ice Storm, since it has a cold and bludgeoning component, which will generate additional instances of this radiant damage. However, these are just the basics, and with more knowledge and understanding, you can definitely expand on it much further. Also, the 2 radiant damage pairs well with our next ring. The Coruscation ring can be found in this heavy chest in the cellar of Last Light Inn. I usually just climb this vine rope down to access it safely. And speaking of safety, careful, as this chest is trapped and can hurt. The Coruscation ring grants arcane radiance. Whenever the wearer deals spell damage while illuminated by light source, they also inflict 2 turns of radiating orb upon the target. Radiating orbs is a condition that reduces the target's attack roll by 1 per turn remaining. A multi-hit spell can proc the Coruscation ring several times per cast. However, my favorite way to use this ring is Fire and Ice Storm, and let me tell ya, it can get insane. You know how I harp on about the cold and bludgeoning component with the spell? Well, that's a double activation of Coruscation for 4 turns of radiating orb applied to every enemy it hits. Now for the low cost of 1 sorcery point and clicking on extended, that 1 cast can debuff an entire area of enemies for 8 turns of radiating orb, a -8 to attack rolls, effectively almost outright denying enemies the ability to hit your party. Insanely valuable. Or you know, keep the Sparks Wall ring on so you don't electrocute yourself. A girl has to be able to accessorize freely after all. For the bow slot, you can upgrade your offhand to the Naya Missa, purchased from Roa Moonglow. This +1 hand crossbow deals force damage, which is rarely resisted, making this a handy tool if you're looking for something to spend your bonus action on. Enchant it with the Drakethroat Glaive from the same vendor to increase its damage potential. Again, our offhand is mostly a tool to break consumables, so not the end of the world if you don't upgrade. Let's go over consumables for Act 2. The Potion of Angelic Reprieve can be purchased in bulk from Lantarv at Moonrise Towers. When you use this potion, you fall asleep for 2 turns, waking up with the effects of a short rest, and all level 1 and 2 spell slots restored. These low-level spell slots might not sound significant, but we can trick the game for infinite resources if you're interested. Again, not needed. First, convert all your spell slots into sorcery points, then your sorcery points into level 2 spell slots, and your spell slots into sorcery points again. Repeat the process until you're happy or bored. Whatever happens first, then chuck an Angelic Reprieve and plop down on the floor for a nap. So graceful. You wake up to a very confused game, having refunded you way too many resources. You can repeat this whole process as much as you like, though do be aware that long rests or restoration pods will reset these extra resources back to normal. I keep saying it, but you don't need this trick to play this build. It's just for fun or novelty. As for elixirs, the choices remain the same as before, so I'll briefly go over them. Bloodlust elixirs will give you an extra action when you destroy an enemy, something you'll do often. Consider including a weaker enemy in your lightning bolt or one of your summons to proc bloodlust. Now the reason I wanted to talk about this more here is the Metamagic extended spell. If you kill a target with the spell you empowered with this Metamagic, you will gain an additional action on this turn, and at the start of next turn you'll have more spell slots to play with in Act 2 and restoration methods, so bloodlust feels less wasteful. I generally find them sold from Tally or Roa Moonglow, and you can always return to Darif in Act 1 at any time before you enter the Shadowfell. Vigilance elixirs help with topping the initiative order if you're forgetful in certain encounters. However, since we have access to more initiative gear this act, I don't think it's impactful, honestly. As for Illithid Powers, there's nothing new, although if you would so indulge, consider Space Gummy Maxing to lower your color weak threshold, letting your enemies explode in a chain reaction. In Act 2, we will still use our prior gameplay loops. However, with additional debuffing tools, combined with reverberation gear, extended metamagic can get a bit more of a workout for large fights that will take more than a turn. One that a lot of people have trouble with is the Halcyon fight. Our opening move was to cast Sleet Storm from a scroll, keeping the first turn controlled and uneventful. On the next turn, we went for an extended Ice Storm. The initial blast finished off the weaker opponents, triggering our Bloodlust extra action for this round and the next, thanks to that extended Metamagic, and it covered the area in ice, making difficult, slippery terrain for those remaining. And to finish the turn, we chipped away a few of the closer enemies, while the ice surface did its job, keeping the rest at bay. Next turn I dealt with the close enemies with another extended Ice Storm, triggering another 2 rounds of Bloodlust extraction and another one. Can you tell I really like this spell? And you can see the survivors are now deep after radiating orbs and suffering penalties to all their attack rolls, which also helps protect the portal. Anyways, this was the turn that everything was under control again. Did you know prone enemies automatically fail the dexterity saving throws? Great for making sure our lightning bolt does its damage. And don't forget, there are plenty of battles where this extended Ice Storm is efficient in multiple ways. The honor mode ender himself, Merkel. Not necessary, but I gave myself an extra level 5 spell slot as a contingency in case I miss. I went invisible and opened up with a surprise round on the Mind Player. This is public enemy number 1. Dispose of this guy as fast as possible. With this in mind, I shot a water bottle with my offhand, then hit the Mind Player with a level 4 Witch Bolt. Now phase 1 of this fight is just taking your time, chipping away at Kefrik while preserving your level 5 spell slots. With the Avatar of Death appearing, Miss Milka's first move was to blast Shovel. This wasn't to shock you, it actually has 2 purposes, giving us another action from the Bloodlust proc and a few lightning charges to juice it up with. Shadowcute, our assistant, upcasted Blindness to make it force multiple saving throws. We only needed Merkel to fail 1 roll, which he did, giving our Witch Bolt a source of advantage. Our first level 5 Witch Bolt was cast. With confidence, Destructive Wrath and Luck of the Far Realms was confirmed. This hit heavy for 288 damage, and her follow-up was another level 5 Witch Bolt, which sealed the outcome of this battle. This is not an optimal setup. In fact, I challenged myself to see if I could one-shot this boss. And while it is obviously achievable, I don't recommend it because it's kind of scuffed and high key. But with that being said, there is a lot of room for error here. We have leftover resources on this first turn, and we're set up defensively enough to survive a round or 2. So there's no reason to be anxious about this becoming a roadblock on your adventure. You can absolutely 2-shot Merkel with just Wet and 2 Witch Bolts. Without the sweaty try-hard shenanigans, I do here the spectacle. Welcome to Act 3, the Victory Lap. Casters pick up some insane gear at this stage, and most of it you can pick up early and without fuss. Again, I'll be accompanied by Shadowcute, who is an identical build, but with the Storm Sorcery subclass. Not to dismiss this build at all, it is still entirely capable solo in honor mode. She's just here so everyone stays wet. Anyways, enough yapping. Let's start with some head. Here, the Birthright can be purchased from Sorceress Sundries. It simply adds 2 to Charisma. As simple as this sounds, the impacts are more than noticeable. That's a +1 to spell attack rolls, spell saves, and damage. Not to mention with our Draconic ancestry, that gets added another time. Let's use 22 Charisma as an example in a crit. So our baseline modifier is +6, add +6 again because of Draconic. This is already 12, turning to 24 in a crit and 48 with vulnerability. It adds up real quick. Next we have the Cloak slot. The Cloak of the Weave can be purchased from Hellsick at the Devil's Fee. Dark Urge players already know she's a Diabolist, but the rest of us need to pass a DC 15 Arcana check for that information. The Cloak of the Weave gives you the following: Arcane Enchantment, a +1 bonus to spell save DC and attack rolls. Another simple but important boost, making it harder for enemies to avoid our most destructive spells, and failed saving throws mean full damage. You can also ignore Absorb Elements. It doesn't function properly. Hey, so for our armor slot, I'm going to offer you 3 choices again. It's actually been a recurring theme for this video. The first we have, you guessed it, the Adamantine Splint. You can probably tell from the thumbnail and the footage, I like this armor a lot. And it has staying power because of the damage reduction, crit immunity, all in one slot. Consider keeping this on if you don't want to sacrifice another slot for crit immunity. Next up is the Armor of Persistence. It can be purchased from Damon in the lower city, offering a very solid 20 AC, bolstered by Magical Plate, reducing all incoming damage by 2. If that damage reduction seemed too little for you, you'll also gain permanent Blade Ward, halving any form of bludgeoning, piercing, or slashing damage done to you. To top this all off, you also have a bonus 1d4 to saving throws, thanks to a permanent resistance condition, an incredible piece of armor that allows you to shrug off both spells and physical attacks. A sturdy and aesthetic piece for your Tempest Sorcerer. If a woman in armor doesn't do anything for you, my condolences. You want to have spellcaster gear. I get it. In that case, consider the Armour of Landfall. You can find it stocked at Sorcerer Sundries. It gives you 13 AC at base, plus your dexterity modifier, and also the following features. Advantage on Constitution saving throws, +1 to your spell save DC. To keep our mitts warm, we will go for the Helldust gloves. You will have to handle Helm in order to obtain them. Unfortunately, he's really annoying, resistant to lightning damage, and Ethereal Escape is his favorite move. Good thing you can remove the resistance while wetting him and deny his escape reaction by taking an attacker opportunity. Once defeated, you can find the Helldust gloves somewhere on their body. We're mainly after the Infernal Acuity feature, granting us a +1 to attack rolls and spell save DC, further bolstering our chances to hit with our single target high damage spells and imposing felt saves on our AoE spells. Our boot choices are still from Act 1, with the Boots of Stormy Clamor. Reverb is still a very powerful tool, and the Water Sparkers are still worth using if you want a one-turn Nova setup out of combat. And finally, we can upgrade our main hand slot from our Act 1 staff, but in order to do so, let's go on a little adventure. Make your way to Sorcerer Sundries and solve the lukewarm portal puzzle to let yourself into Ramesev's tower, but you literally die if you get it wrong, but I'm sure you can get the right answer. Once at the tower, make your way down the floor and use the See Invisibility scroll to find out what each of these buttons do. If you don't have such a scroll, not to worry, there's an elixir of See Invisibility from a backpack on the outer ring. Find the one that reads below and take it to the bottom floor. Here, we can see an invisible lever in front of the staff. This is a pretty steep DC 20 Arcana check, so put on the Headbanger Intellect and boost your rolls with enhanced abilities to pass it. Otherwise, yeah, Disintegrate is even less fun than it sounds. If you're nervous about failing, stand here behind the lever. In this position, the spell clips the protective dome and misses you completely. Successfully disabling the barrier grants you access to Mark Eshkia, our legendary quarterstaff that will ascend our Tempest Sorcerer's power. It grants the following features. Kareska's Favor. We select an element to imbue ourselves with. We're definitely selecting Bolts of Doom. With this active, we can gain resistance to lightning damage, and our lightning spells deal additional damage equal to our proficiency bonus. Also, when we deal spell damage, we gain 2 lightning charges, so it's had a good run, but we can put away that spell sparkler. Remember, once we have lightning charges, we have +1 to attack rolls and deal 1 additional lightning damage. These charges are also a good damage rider, and once they reach 5 stacks, this turns into a 1d8 damage rider source. The glaze does not stop there, however. We also gain 2 lightning spells, Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning. We'll start with the simple one first. Lightning Bolt is just the spell we've been using a lot already. This staff just saves the spell slot, leaving me to discuss Chain Lightning with you. This 10d8 level 6 lightning spell is devastating. It targets one creature, then splits off and hits another 3 enemies within a certain distance of the primary target. This will be your go-to spell for groups of enemies, and I honestly believe this item version of the spell is better than the learned or spell options. Why? Because this is the only version you can use twinned spell with. Twin casting this spell is diabolical. Not only is this 10d8 bouncing around, frying entire combats, it's also possible for a creature to be hit by a bounce from each chain. This isn't consistent and works better in larger groups, but when it happens, it is very nice to see that enemy fried extra crispy. What you may not know is you can target any random consumable with a health pool to trigger Bloodlust, which will also bounce off to your enemies, whether it be a random potion, bag, or rotten tomato. If you don't believe your Chain Lightning will kill an opponent, consider this strategy. These 2 spells are short rest cooldowns, but also they're region refreshable. By traveling to Rivington or the lower city, you will bypass this cooldown, and even Raphael's bath water will refresh these spells. So yeah, cast these as much as your dopamine can handle. Oh, did you think I was done with the staff? I'm yet to yap on about Arcane Battery. Once you hit this button, the next spell you cast does not cost a spell slot. This restriction is per character, meaning if you have a lovely cleric with an expensive spell, such as Hero's Feast, pass this staff to them to cast it for free. And in my deep dive with this staff, I discovered some novel tech, which I'll call toggle casting. Basically, by toggling Arcane Battery off mid-cast animation, this spell becomes completely free. It will not consume the spell slot or trigger the Arcane Battery cooldown. As you can see, under normal means, it's impossible to click this toggle as the spell is animating, but if you drag the Arcane Battery toggle onto your custom hotbar, you can hit this hotkey as the spell is casting to have infinite free spells. A more detailed explanation of toggle casting can be found in the text section. Let's move on. Our offhand weapon will be the dagger, a Rhapsody. I don't care what people say, the Cazador can be a threat to any honor mode party if you're ill prepared, so high caution is advised. He has an initiative stat of +10. In this footage, I swapped to the Sentinel Shield, Master Soul Perception, and Hellrider to beat him by +1. I snuck up, opened with the Create Water, exchanged pleasantries to find out I am first in the turn order. Unfortunately for him, with a Chain Lightning and crit Witch Bolt. He should have stayed in the coffin. Once you defeat the stinky vampire lord, you can find the dagger on his sleeping body. Rhapsody has an insane passive ability called Scarlet Remittance. Gain a +1 to attack rolls, damage, and spell save DC for every foe you slay, up to a maximum of 3. This pretty much solves any hit rate issues, unless you Shadowhunt, and boosts our DC so our foes get melted more often. However, to empower this passive, you need to kill hostile targets. The most low effort way is to go down into the Elfsong basement and slay 3 rats a day. This dagger has almost 3 items worth of features packed into a single slot. A worthy and notable offhand weapon. Also for those who stayed the path and didn't indulge in Illithid Powers, you can also consume all your charges and use Scarlet Saturation to guarantee critical damage on your next successful attack. Note, this is only critical damage, not a critical hit, meaning you can still mess with the attack. The charges won't be consumed if that happens though, so you can keep trying until you get it. A few fun things about this ability. Under normal circumstances, this is consumed when you land a weapon attack. However, if you use spell attacks, this is not consumed. So for the duration of 2 turns, and for however many action points you have, you can deal as much critical damage with your Witch Bolt or Chromatic Orb as you see fit. This ability should have a long rest cooldown, but using spell attacks seems to confuse the item, and you should be able to kill 3 more creatures to charge your saturation back up. If this doesn't happen automatically, region travel, and it should light up again. For our next slot, we want the Amulet of the Devout. First go to the Stormshore Tabernacle and head down the wooden hatch. If you keep getting spotted, consider using a Darkness Arrow. Once down in the basement, do be very cautious of these traps here. In the main offering chest is the Amulet of the Devout, offering 2 features. High spell casting, granting you additional +2 to your spell save DC. I find this a pretty substantial increase, and I'll love this neck piece on any caster who imposes a lot of saving throws, like we do with Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning. And lastly, we have one more channel Divinity Charge. Throughout the game, we only progressed our Tempest Domain Cleric to the 2nd level, meaning we were kind of restricted to 1 charge, but now having 2 charges allows us to deal an absurd amount of damage. The in-game description says this channel Divinity Charge is restored on long rest, but this is actually incorrect. This is recharge on a short rest, which is very good cadence for a caster. And that's not all. Apparently, if this additional charge is spent on Destructive Wrath, you can unequip this amulet and re-equip it to regain the charge without the need to short rest or long rest. That's so stupidly silly. Oh, just back on track, you'll probably be cursed opening this chest. I get around this by putting a Fall Cloud down and healing. This avoids the surprise round, and sometimes I kinda enjoy the entertainment when I do this in the lower city. Let's go over our ring slots. You know, for how many fingers we have, we can only wear 2 rings in BG3, so let's discuss. Okay, ring slot 1. The Ring of Protection is always relevant. +1 AC and saving throws will never go amiss. Although, if you want some excitement in your life, might I suggest the Callous Glow Ring. This 2 radiant might seem small, but this is a little damage rider that can. As for the second ring slot, well, you can probably keep using the coruscation ring just to debuff the enemy hit rate in larger fights, and extended ice storm goes hard in this scenario. Or if you're like me and like shiny, flashy new jewelry, let's go get a new ring. Continuing the theme of spell save DC, we'll move on to the Ring of Feywild Sparks. You will have to defeat the hag in order to obtain it, and it's a pretty difficult fight, so let me give you some tips. Fire Chromatic stops the Pearl Spore Bells from healing. I use Scarlet Saturation to make my spell attacks crit for 2 turns. Twin cast Fire Orb at the remaining 2 Pearl Spore Bells, and 1 crit bolt on the hag, and she's dead. There are no mines for this kid to work in, so I never bother saving her. Good luck to you though, if that's a priority. Once dealt with, you can find the Ring of Feywild Sparks on the hag. Oh, but Evelyn, doesn't this ring only work for wild magic sorcerers? I do get this question often, and I don't blame you for thinking that. However, this ring is a hidden +1 to spell save DC, not indicated by the tooltip, and the proof is here, shown by the in-game combat log. Again, we're boosting our spell save DC to an absurd amount, which should be at least 21 by this point, meaning more fried enemies on the battlefield. We are retiring the hand crossies for the Hellrider longbow, purchased from Ferg the Sharon trader, who will only sell it to you if Shadowheart didn't bleach her hair, or she's not in the party, or if you're like me, who can't live without Shadowcute. You can temporarily just leave her at the waypoint here while you do your shopping. The Hellrider longbow adds +3 to your initiative rolls. At this point in the game, our strategy shifts, especially for Space Gummy enjoyers. We're now saving that bonus action primarily for Black Hole to gather and position enemies, or for the occasions we need an emergency create water with a quickened Metamagic. That makes a +3 to initiative far more valuable now that we're facing some of the highest initiative bosses in the game. Welcome to CANTRIPMAXXING, where we unapologetically embrace the wonderful spaghetti mess Larian has blessed us with to achieve this. So you're probably wondering what's happening. I mean, same to be honest, but 427 damage with a cantrip on one target doesn't seem half bad. So let me walk you through how to achieve the same result. For this recipe, you'll need at least 2 levels in Sorcerer for Twin Cast, the Gemini gloves obtained from Helzic's special stock, and you decide CANTRIPMAXXING. These are also known to work with this trick. The order of operation matters. First, click Twin Cast, then click the Gemini gloves, then select your spell, and finally the poor sods at the receiving end. With the Tempest Sorcerer, you can even do 2 shocking grafts on one enemy if you target the ground, and it's actually diabolical. The Gemini gloves have a short rest limitation, but I don't like limitations. To find out how to bypass this little annoyance with the gloves and other toggle abilities, refer to my toggle casting tech later in the video. You're probably wondering how I'm getting so much damage. Let me quickly go over the gear. We're focusing on dealing a massive amount of damage in a single turn without a lot of preparation, rather than spending multiple turns setting up for theoretically optimal damage. The Birthright, the +2 Charisma, the Potent Robe, or if Alfira had a whoopsie, you can substitute Gramma's Curtains with Oren's Lobster Armour. Just to note that this armor is really undervalued and slept on by the community. +1 to damage doesn't seem like a lot until you realize it adds to all your damage riders individually. Boots of Stormic Hammer for reverberation, double magic clubs for the dumbest damage shenanigans, elemental augmentation for more charisma damage, the Callous Glow Ring, and since I don't know what the warm touch of a woman feels like, Condition Locked Rhapsody, and Marco Hishgear. Here are some buffs that could help your Tempest Sorcerer for the final section of the game. At the circus in Rivington, you can commission a statue of yourself for 5,000 gold. One long rest after, you'll find said statue and the Bless buff, granting a 1d4 to attack rolls and saving throws, mostly used here for landing that Pivotal Witch Bolt or Chromatic Orb. If you're wanting to stretch out your elixir or whatever temporary buffs for the day, consider having a relaxing dip in Raphael's bath water. As long as you have your disguise, the residents of Hell do not care. Interacting with the Faucet restores all your spell slots, channel divinity charges, and Marco Hishgear spells. Just a note that I actually didn't use the mirror for this video, as the House of Grief was the last thing I did, so you can really skip this buff if you're lazy like me. It is possible to get a +2 and a +1 charisma bonus from the mirror, but due to random rolling behind the scenes and only 6 chances to use the mirror, it's very possible to receive nothing. The shortened version is this: start offering memories to the mirror before you do the DC 25 religion check. You'll know you received Patria's memory when you see this line referencing Gortash, blocking you from succeeding Cellmain. That's a +1 to your charisma required. Once you're done trying to get Patria's memory, you can perform the religion check and continue giving up memories until you're offered a choice between 6 memories or a deception check. Select the Bard's memory for your +2 to charisma. If you have the forbidden knowledge buff from reading the Necromancy of Fae found in Act 1, you can give that up to guarantee the +2 bonus if needed. Shadowheart has some slight variations here. If she rejected Char at any point before using the mirror, she can't receive any bonuses from it. Dark Justicia Shadowheart can interact with the mirror before talking to her parents and gain the benefits, and then save her parents and reject Char immediately after. A Dark Justicia Shadowheart who removes Viconia and kills her parents gets advantage in the religion check and receives the chosen +2 bonus automatically. Yeah, righto. You know the drill about consumables by now. Invis and speed potions would have been priority all game, but in Act 3, let's add 1 insanely busted resource to our repertoire. If you've been here before, you know about my favorite little Act 3 helper, Terrasul. Go see the bugbear tender at the Thieves Guild Hall in the lower city sewers to get your fix. Don't forget to come back after every level up and long rest for his refreshed stock. This is haste, but in powdered form and lasting only 2 turns. However, the 2 major benefits here is that it stacks of haste, speed potions, or mind sanctuary and costs no action economy to use. It will still give you Terrasul jitters, which is the same as the lethargic condition, so do keep track of your usage to avoid skipping your turn at a bad time. If you think an encounter will last for a few turns, it's ideal to use Terrasul on the round after your speed potion, so the lethargic and the jitters happen at the same time, skipping only 1 turn instead of 2. You can also sanctuary through those skip turns if the timing is off or things don't go to plan. This is a fantastic emergency button if things go wrong, giving us additional AC, movement, and an action. But generally for our usage, we want to go all out right from the start. And Terrasul gives us the action economy for that crazy burst first turn, because the best defense is firing everyone before they realize what's happening, or whatever the saying is. And bloodloss elixirs are very productive in Act 3. At this stage of the game, we have far more resources to work with, and even more means of replenishing them through both legitimate and less legitimate means. That action economy boost can help us 1 turn most encounters or cut the tougher fights short, and we're capable of completely melting battles by now, so securing a kill every round should be no problem. But on the occasions you're left with just the tanky types and aren't confident in getting that proc, don't forget you can get that kill by targeting an object like a potion with chain lightning, or shovel if you're struggling to find something to destroy. Do remember extended Metamagic can give you 2 turns of bloodlust, meaning you gain an extra action on the current turn and the start of the next one. And onto Illithid Powers, but this time we're talking about the ones unlocked by accepting the partial Illithid form. This is not an easy choice to make on a playthrough and won't be right for everyone. And I'll remind you here again that you really don't need these to be successful, but they do make you very powerful should you succumb to that temptation. Fly is an ability you unlock by default if you make this choice. Storm Sorcerers know the fun feeling of flight all the way back from level 1 in the subclass, but this version does not require a bonus action. It is probably the most powerful thing about being partial Illithid, if I'm being honest. It only costs half your movement to use this ability, effectively doubling your available movement in combat if you use it consistently. Great for avoiding difficult terrain, getting over obstacles, or outmaneuvering your enemies, allowing you to position well. Do not sleep on the advantage this ability gives you. Black Hole, not to be confused with Shadowheart's camp supplies, is an Illithid power that pulls in enemies to the center of a large radius, perfect for setting up a lightning bolt or gathering enemies closer to fork your chain lightning successfully. Once you cast Black Hole, you have an additional 5 turns to keep casting it, only restricted by your action economy. Free cast. Generally the best use for this is getting a free level 6 spell slot every long rest, but this game's spaghetti coding lets us refresh that ability by walking in and out of an aura, and works in and out of combat. An easy aura to use would be the Resonance Stone, as it has a large radius so you can have a handy helper carry it around for you or just drop it on the ground. And finally, we'll get into some gameplay examples. We've relied a lot on the wet condition and lightning vulnerabilities this playthrough, and now we have the peak of that concept with twin cast chain lightning in the mix. But what about enemies who have either lightning resistance or immunity? Let's talk about how I defeated Answer, an undead dragon who is immune to lightning damage, and the wet condition is generally an honor run ender for the ill prepared. First, I dealt with his elementals, then drugged up my own water elemental to give it a +8 boost to its save DC, since it uses its strength for its casting modifier. Burning was necessary for my plan here, so I opened combat with an Alki Fire, then had my elemental use its Winter's Breath and apply the brittle condition, making Answer vulnerable to thunder damage. Mind Blast gave us another turn to set up, and Scarlet Saturation guaranteed critical damage. Summoning us from the inventory costs no resources, and the elemental breaks the speed potion. Twin casting Thunder Chromatic Orbs at us and Answer gave me the Bloodlust proc, so I was able to fire off a few more critical orbs. For his gathering power phase, I flew behind a crystal, making sure to confirm that the Answer's Eye condition disappears from my status bar, so I'd survive for the final blow. Once you understand immunities, resistances and vulnerabilities, and you can steamroll a tough boss like this that directly counters your core build mechanics, no one else really stands a chance. As for Loroakan, he is immune to elemental types unless you deal with the associated Myrmidon. In our case, let's focus on the Air Myrmidon, which upon examination is resistant to thunder and lightning. So just wet everyone and hit them with the eye shotgun, making sure not to target the scrawny wizard, as he can retaliate with a very hurtful reaction. With his lightning immunity out of the way, it was lights out for Loroakan. Welcome to the tech section. Some of these are simply an explanation of how certain mechanics work, and some are unintended gameplay features. I truly understand that not everyone has the stomach for dumb gimmicks, and I get that. As always, you don't need any of this to make the build work, but BG3 is a mechanically dense and interesting game, and it feels like a shame not to share. With all that being said, I have ordered the tech in ascending order from normal to marinated. Action Alacrity and Surprise rounds. Ice and Lightning casters are most productive and efficient when they start combat with their action intact. The spell Create Water is one of the few spells in BG3 which doesn't consume your action when cast out of combat, and since I'm a big fan of the similar Assassin Rogue feature, I'm calling this one Action Alacrity. Here in this section, I will go over 3 scenarios which will give the Action Alacrity on turn start. The order is in ascending difficulty. Scenario 1. Your enemies are neutral or yellow status. Cast Minor Illusion and gather your enemies into a convenient pile. Once happy, enter turn-based mode. Create Water, offhand attack to aggro, and enter combat. You may have consumed your bonus action, but luckily, you regain your action to fry your enemies with a lightning bolt. Scenario 2. Your enemies are hostile or red. Use invisibility. Cast Minor Illusion until satisfied. Enter turn-based mode. Then cast Create Water. This should surprise the enemy and give you an additional round of action economy. Not that you really need it. Scenario 3. Universally applicable to all classes. If you want to be a makeshift assassin, I will warn you, this will take a lot of practice and will not be 100% consistent. Basically, take out your bow, aim at the enemy, and fire an arrow. As this arrow is 3/4 of the way to impact, hit turn-based mode. Start combat, and you'll have your action back. This is definitely made easier by using hotkeys. For PC, I press F to swap weapon set to range, control left click to fire my arrow, then shift spacebar to enter turn-based mode. Useful for starting engagements with Action Alacrity and getting a cheap shot in, regardless of which class you are. Extended Metamagic is something I find to be very undervalued by the community. For the cost of 1 sorcery point, it doubles the duration of conditions, summons and surfaces caused by spells. Simple uses would be to extend the Create Water spell for zippy zappity shenanigans or Area Denial spells. This we know already. Okay, let's go over why I think it's undervalued. Not only can we double the duration of spells, we can double the item interactions and weapon coatings. However, martial use of extended metamagic is outside the scope of this video. Let's instead look at examples from our build. The Gloves of Belligerent Skies and Boots of Stormy Clamor give 2 stacks of reverberation each, so 4 total. Now when we reach 5 stacks of reverberation, the enemy has to roll a save or fall prone, which will happen on the next spell we cast. So in normal circumstances, we have to cast twice to prone our enemy. However, if you simply click Extended Metamagic, theoretically, we should apply 8 turns of reverberation, right? Well, it should be, but I can't really tell what the number is in game because the counter resets. But what I do know is my enemy is lying on the floor in 1 spell cast. If I add Spine Shutter to my gear, I get 6 stacks of reverb per cast without extended metamagic. And can you see the log here? Yeah, that enemy rolled 2 saving throws against reverb, meaning that check happened twice. What about with extended? Making it 12 stacks. Still 2 saves. I have no idea why, but 6 stacks of reverb from gear somehow triggers 2 saving throws. Let's next discuss a spell I really enjoy nerding out about, Ice Storm. As you can see, it has 2 damage instances, a cold and a bludgeoning one. This means if you have an item that interacts with damage, the effect will trigger twice. In this example, let's use the Coruscation Ring, which inflicts 2 turns of Radiating Orb upon a target when you cast a spell. So a normal Ice Storm will cast 4 turns of Radiating Orb. However, if you extend this Ice Storm, it will inflict 8 turns of Radiating Orb. Pretty insane value if you want to debuff a large encounter. So use cases for me, kiting and debuffing an enemy with extended Witch Bolt or forcing Thunder DRS on my Witch Bolt for a kill, and definitely blasting and debuffing the field with an extended Ice Storm. Any survivors will have a great time with my spell save DC on that surface. Another valuable thing is Bloodlust. If you get a kill with extended spell, the Bloodlust proc lasts for an additional turn, meaning you get another action at the start of your next turn. There is a way to dual wield without actually having the feat. I went a little insane trying to understand how to do this, as the method is very convoluted. I tried writing this in a way that future me could understand, and trust me, I rewrote this many times. In fact, I got the help of a degree-educated writer. But if you can't understand my British accent, please refer to the tips, tricks, exploits and gimmicks section of the Attach Honor Mode party template for step-by-step instructions. You will need 2 characters. Person A, the one you want to dual wield exploit with, and Person B. Equip Person A with 2 daggers. Equip Person B with 1 decide weapon and a shield. Drag the shield from Person B to Person A. Your decide weapon should be in the offhand of Person A. Next, drag the dagger from the main hand slot of Person A to the offhand. This should swap the decide weapon to the main hand, and the dagger should be in the offhand. Now equip Person B with the second decide weapon and the shield, and repeat the process. I told you this is so convoluted and cooked. Again, take it slow and refer to the class notes if you get stuck. If I'm being truly honest, it's so hard to follow, and I've done it dozens of times, and I still need to have the instructions open next to me, so don't stress if it takes a few tries to get right. I discovered this silly technique, which I'll call toggle casting. It allows you to bypass the short or long rest limitation on items with an ability toggle. In this example, I'll be using Marco Heshke's Arcane Battery to give myself infinite spells. When toggled, the next spell you cast does not cost a spell slot. First, click on the custom hotbar. Next, go to your spellbook, then go to the common tab. Locate the Arcane Battery toggle. Drag it to your custom hotbar. The slot you select will have the corresponding corresponding hotkey, toggle Arcane Battery on, select a spell, and get ready to cast it. Click to confirm your spell, then immediately press the hotkey. Congratulations on breaking the spell economy. The timing might require some practice, or if you're a goober like me, you can mash this hotkey and it will still work. Basically, before your spell animation finishes and consumes your resource, we have tricked the game into thinking our arcane battery was off by toggling it mid-cast. There aren't many toggle items in the game, but I had fun bypassing the once per short rest cooldown of the Gemini gloves for some diabolical shenanigans. Turn buffering is a very similar concept, confusing the game into giving you something for free, allowing you to ignore BG3's resource system almost entirely by ending your turn before any spell or resource dependent action finishes its animation. You can completely bypass the resource consumption because as far as the game is concerned, it's not your resource if it's not your turn. The technique is very simple. Cast or do anything and end your turn before the animation finishes. This can be helped with a hotkey, spacebar on PC, and Y or triangle for my console players. It's actually easier to turn buffer on console, and the droid shapeshift animation is very generous if you want something to practice with. Now for some caveats. You must be in combat for this to work. The environmental turns in turn-based mode take too long to resolve, consuming your resource. You cannot be last in the turn order, and if you have party members acting at the same time in initiative, make sure you end all of their turns and leave yours for last. If the enemy finishes their turn too fast because they were prone or stunned, it goes back to your turn too quickly and ends up using your resource. Generally, reactions can't turn buffer, so unfortunately for us Tempest Sorcerers, we can't have infinite channel divinities. But that being said, paladins can turn buffer divine smites. How many times have you picked up an item in BG3, looked at its unique abilities, seen that short or long rest cooldown, and never actually end up using it because you're saving it for that one special occasion? Yeah, I'm also very guilty, but with something called region refreshing, I started using these abilities more. It's so simple. By choosing a waypoint that is in a different area, you'll get a load screen, and upon loading, you'll have your ability refreshed. Yeah, that's it. It works on all sorts of things, not only items. Fighter's Action Surge, Shovel Summon, Bart Song Arrest for an infinite short rest. Far too many to list here. This has many silly use cases. A favorite of mine is refreshing the Drakefoot Glaive and enchanting an entire armory for my party. And if you want even more silliness with that one, leave those weapons in a container outside a camp before long resting in a different region to keep them enchanted for the next day. But for our Tempest Sorcerer, Micah Hishkia for the Free Chain Lightning, Rhapsody for all that juicy critical damage on your spell attacks. Speaking of, the Scarlet Saturation ability from Rhapsody is something I don't see adventurers use often. After killing 3 creatures, you'll gain 3 charges of Scarlet Remittance. According to the tooltip, consuming these charges to activate Scarlet Saturation will make your next attack a guaranteed critical hit, but this is not the case. First of all, you can still miss, sorry, Shadowhunt, but if you manage to hit, this will deal critical damage. Under normal circumstances, the Scarlet Saturation is consumed when you land a weapon attack. However, if you use unarmed, thrown, or spell attacks, the effect will not be consumed. So for the duration of 2 turns, and for however many action points you have, you can deal as much critical damage as you'd like. My favorite thing about this is that it becomes the best option for high crit builds, most often warlock builds. By focusing on hit rating instead of crit fishing and using this single item, you can guarantee every single Eldritch Blast will do critical damage. This is far more efficient than sacrificing half your gear slots and potentially your background and some story choices to reduce your crit threshold. Yes, my duty is to help the community heal from the damage done with crit fishing. On a final note, this ability should have a long rest cooldown, but using spell attacks seems to confuse the item, and you should be able to kill 3 more creatures to charge your saturation back up. If this doesn't happen automatically, region travel and it should light up again. Condition locking is a technique that allows you to have a condition from an item last until long rest on your character, even when you don't have the item equipped. It is truly game breaking. Here's how to have a permanent condition on your character. I call this one condition locking, and I first saw it posted by Magnus. Step 1, drag your desired equipment to the bottom row of your inventory. Step 2, sort your inventory. Using any of these options, we just need the item to move to another inventory space. Step 3, drag the same category of equipment from your character sheet and onto the desired one in your inventory. In this example, I'm dragging a random dagger from my hand onto Rhapsody. Step 4, you want to now proc the condition. So here I went down the stairs and popped some rats to get Scarlet Remittance. Step 5, right click on the equipment and click unequip. Your condition should stay there even if you equip something else. Therefore, condition locked. Here are some examples that are really powerful and broken with this trick. If you use the Helmet of Grit, you gain an extra bonus action if you condition lock below half health, and it still works once you heal, making it a free thief multi-class without any level investment. Tippler's Rage from Punch Drunk Bastard gives advantage on all attacks and thunder damage on melee attacks. But in regard to our Tempest Sorcerer, the condition locks that prove most useful are Punch Drunk Bastard for advantage on attack rolls, the Protecty Sparks Wall for +1 AC and saving throws. Do note you have to be in combat to lock this one. Marker Heshkia for the proficiency bonus to lightning spells, lightning charges and 2 included spells. Yeah, you don't even need the staff equipped to use the twinned chain lightning. It's a bit silly. And finally, Rhapsody for the +3 to attack rolls, damage and spell save. Substitute and replace these items however you wish. And you've made it to the end. I truly understand the video is long, so if you're hearing this right now, thank you from the bottom of my heart. You are amazing. Playing this powerful armored caster was an immaculate vibe, and it was worth the passion and effort to share this take on the Tempest Sorcerer. Do let me know your experience with it in the comments, and best of luck on your adventure.